This is another episode of Summoning Insight. It is going to be Quickly Checks Notes, the second episode of 2024. I caught it there, Monty. I almost flew it. I almost ruined the second episode beginning by not even, but I didn't though. And so what's important, fans, is as we enter 2024, by the way, don't worry, this is still like sort of an off-season episode because obviously we haven't started the actual, like LCK, but in a sense begins today. It doesn't really, begins like the 17th or something, like the 13th or whatever, one of these LEC begins or whatever. So we're coming up soon. It's almost here. But before we begin everything, obviously we should take care of the house cleaning. So Monty, we actually have a sponsor to talk about, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's one that anybody in the world can get. I know a lot of you people who live internationally have been looking for sponsors in order to support us. And so if you're using a VPN, why not use ExpressVPN? I, in fact, am using ExpressVPN right now while we're recording the show on 2 different live streams, so on Twitch and on YouTube, so it handles insane volume. It's been absolutely wonderful to work with. And as you guys know, using the internet without ExpressVPN is like leaving your laptop on a table at the coffee shop while you go to the bathroom. Most of the time, you're probably fine. But what happens if it's gone when you come back, right? And if you're using a lot of public Wi-Fi networks, if you're traveling, you just don't know who's snooping in on your data. Better just to go ahead and keep that under wraps. They've got a great app to use on their phone. As I've said previously, it also works very well with streaming services. It has worked with absolutely every streaming service I have used while I have been in Korea. It's the only VPN, truly, that I have used that's worked with all of them. So I'm a big fan of ExpressVPN as a product myself. It's great for the upload speed as well when I'm streaming. And it's, you know, it's just a very, very reliable VPN. So go ahead, secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/summoning. That's expressvpn.com/summoning. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/summoning. So again, guys, if you've been thinking about getting a VPN, this is a really good way to protect your data and be secure in everything that you do, and also has a lot of perks if you're trying to access various content from around the world. Don't need it for LFN, but maybe for some of the other things you enjoy. All right. So we're getting back into the swing of things. By the way, guys, when it comes to Last Free Nation in general, we've kind of kept Summoning Insight rolling throughout the holidays and throughout the off-season this year, just because we wanted to talk about a lot of the off-season happenings. We are going to be kicking off with the rest of the content slate that you know and love. Best Damn League show, focusing on LEC, will be back. Power Spike will be back with me, Dom, and Degon, and then also the Monty and Wolf show. So as League of Legends continues to go, and then you can also check out our Counter-Strike channel if you like that kind of content as well, and our Culture channel, which has Foreplay and Nerd Legion. So we're finishing up our Christmas film arc with me, Richard, and Thorin. It's been a blast, guys. So do go ahead and check out that channel. You can watch along with us as we talk about these movies. I know a lot of you have been really enjoying that. So now's a great time for your new year to follow through with your resolution of watching more good movies, because that's what we try and pick, except when we accidentally make mistakes like Batman Returns. And
yeah, but in
general,
general, I would say, put it this way, in general, I do think that we have actually served the function of what that series is supposed to be, where it's like, it's not all just obvious films that everyone's seen, but at the same time, we try to find some like hidden gems and classics. And it's like, we've already put our foot wrong once or twice. By the way, a small piece of information, since we're doing the house clean at the beginning, this year, good news and bad news, guys. So the bad news is Best Damn League show is no longer a show of me and Dom just talking about LEC every week. The good news is he will still appear on the occasional episode as a guest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep the show running, but we're just going to I have like a small, like 3 or 4 people who are going to be like regular co-hosts, and it's more like I'll rotate them in and out to keep it interesting and fresh. Because if you notice anyway, as I did the show, even though I would be fine just doing it with Dom each week, I actually think for some people, and I'm sure you run into the same thing with the Monty Wolf show, there are just weeks where it feels like, what really changed since last week? So you have to be like a little bit more creative to find that. So I'm just saying, I already brought, if you notice, guests in every 2 to 3 weeks as sort of a rotator for the same concept anyway, to keep it fresh, you know. So it won't be as good, because Dom was very good, I thought, and obviously we had a great great chemistry, but he'll still be on some episodes, and it'll just be it'll be a different show. There's the key thing. I'm not saying it'll be better or worse, but it'll be a different show.
Also, you're going to get more kind of active insiders on the show as well. So, I mean, I think there'll be more. I think you'll get some interesting insight from like people within the teams themselves.
But it is way, most of the people I'm going to have as the co-hosts will be more sort of the straight man approach of they'll probably just do more classic analysis and be less rude. But don't worry, I can provide, basically Monty, it's like a bespoke service. I can provide any amount of insulting, derogatory, unprofessional material that you require. And even if you can't provide any for yourself, you know, so you know that, Monty, I've offered you that service for 10 years now.
Thank you very much.
We are not that far away. We're only something like a month from the actual anniversary, you know.
Yes.
So I'll think about something we'll do for that, but we'll do something funny. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, in February, we are going to have the 10th anniversary. I know we just got done with our 200 episode celebration, but now we're on our bullshit of our 10-year celebration. And what that means is we already are cooking up something a little bit special for that, kind of like the best moments of Summoning Insight throughout the last 10 years. So yet another piece of content on Last Free Nation that you can look forward to. We've got a lot coming this year, and thank you guys for supporting us. Again, supporting our sponsors, best way to support us. Also, you get cool stuff because we try and actually pick sponsors that we ourselves enjoy. In fact, we have turned down deals, guys, because we didn't think you would like them and we didn't think we liked them. So
exactly.
we're
like Riot with Neon, but for real. They just pretended to do that, Monty. They actually secretly did want to do that deal. We turned the deals down for real. Also, I don't want to seem manipulative at all, guys, but Monty literally has another mouth to feed. If you don't support us on this channel, if you indeed like our thing and products, then Monty and another person in his family go starving. So I'm not saying what you should do or not do, but you know, at the end of the day, I don't want to sound controversial, but I think kids should eat. There you go. There's my political message for 2024.
Thank you very much. Yes, my wife had another kid on Friday, so is now my second son.
All of Monty's children are named after like historical epic figures or like sci-fi fantasy characters, because the name Orion easily could be like, you know, some sort of like space samurai or something. That's a pretty dope name, actually. That's pretty good.
Hey, look, you know, it wasn't my first choice, but it was a choice my wife agreed on. So I wanted to name him. I wanted to name him Perseus, but that was shot down.
It's too far for her, right? Okay. This would even work. I got the Greek just name. Like you have Maximus and you called him Max. You could easily just call him Percy. Obviously, as a short, couldn't you? Like that would even work. That was the idea.
That was the idea. So I thought, hey, we'll just call him Percy for short. She didn't like that, so we went with the other Greek mythological figure of Orion, also because Orion is a constellation that is visible in the winter months in the northern hemisphere. So
and he was born now, right? I see.
He was born in January, so it seemed appropriate. So now Maximus is joined by Orion. Everybody's doing great. She is in her Korean natal spa in Korea, man.
People don't know. They actually have a dope thing there, because I saw also Elke's wife did the same thing recently. Basically, essentially, in the Korean healthcare system, whatever amount you can pay, you can just get whatever you want. So the joke is, you can pay for some sort of like Blade Runner-esque thing where, like, after giving birth, you're sort of like in almost like a resort, right, where they take care of every possible aspect. And as a result, it's apparently super lovely. I've seen some of the videos; it looks amazing, mate.
Yeah, so it's basically like a hotel room, except there are a bunch of nurses there who will take care of the baby whenever you want to, so you can sleep all night. They'll look after it all night, feed the baby in the middle of the night, help you out. They give you like massages and like take care of you. So she's there now with the baby. I will go visit her again tomorrow. I was there for the first few days. And yeah, I'm taking care of our other son at home. So yeah, it has been a good time. Really glad that everything went well.
Before anyone suggests that's indulgent, Monty's talking about a former guest on the show, so it's totally related. I'm like one of those evil League of Legends mods that just makes anything relevant that I want to be, and anything that's like, yeah, that's relevant. It's like, well, it's true though. She was on the show multiple times, at least twice, I think.
Yeah.
I think she came on the 200th episode and then that one back in the day. By the way, as I've pointed out on that episode, the best part is how those comments have aged so poorly, Monty, on the episode that she came on, because they don't know behind the scenes. I knew she was already dating you, obviously. And so on it, right, I'm just sort of being a bit naughty, right, being a bit bawdy. And they all think I'm like doing that to her to make her uncomfortable. So because they didn't get the relationship, there's loads of the comments like, well, Thorin's like really going over the top. It's like, I actually know this person in real life, you idiot. Like, it's not just some random person I just met today, is it? Like, bloody esports fans love them. By the way, I'll give you a bit of an intro, because obviously some of the stories never cross over from the other shows. The one that would blow your mind the most, Monty, is you've been at events. Obviously, you worked at Flashpoint, right? You know, Anders is someone who actually just has always like gravitated to me. Me and him have always got along really well. We have like crazy conversations for like 3 hours about like crazy rabbit hole level stuff of conspiracy stuff. Even though that's been our relationship the whole time, Monty. I think I've known him since like 2013 or something, man. Every event, he's always been really nice to me. On camera, he's always come on. It was a famous thing among Nutter fans that they, you know, fans do this mad thing where they think that by sitting and watching the stream, they're like, do you remember back in the day when they made that thing with fucking that actor? I can't remember his name, Tim Roth or whatever. The one called like "Would You Lie to Me," where he could like see micro expressions that people had, and he could sort of like read what their mental state was. It was kind of like he could psychologize them and solve crimes by seeing like pictures of people. They think they can do that, random fans, right? So they'll be watching a broadcast, and a classic thing they would routinely do is go, like when me and Anders were on camera together, they'd go, you can tell by the way Anders is looking, like he's really uncomfortable when Thorin talks to me, probably like secretly resents or hates it. They would do this thing for years, bro, and the whole time, like even Anders would be like, what are they talking about? And I was like, this is the craziest gaslighting I've ever seen, because these fans don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but they just decide, they like created a whole like, you know, like universe in their mind of like what our relationships were, what was going on, and none of it was ever, it wasn't even like grounded in any reality at all. I think it's just because like maybe because I was friends with him, I've made like a joke about him at the beginning or something, you know, like roasted him for being like slightly overweight, with spoiler, like he even jokes about that himself, doesn't he? So like it's one of those classic ones though where fans like went so far down this road that like I was like, where did he get onto that one? Like there was nothing even going on there, boys. That's actually one of our mates. What are you talking about?
Anders is also just like the chillest human being.
It would be next level if they were actually right and I didn't know he actually did hit me the whole time. If that's not to be true, I'd actually feel bad. I can't lie. Like 10 years.
He's been hiding it super well, I guess.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, especially because
I've just really seething with rage behind the scenes. I don't know.
I've been behind the scenes with both you guys on numerous occasions, been totally fine. And also, just Anders is the chillest guy in general, so it's hard to believe that.
I don't think the joke is Anders doesn't hate anyone, guys. He doesn't hate anyone. He's ridiculous like that. He's like DDK. He's one of those people where like they don't seem like they come from this world, mate. They're from like 200 years ago and they just appeared now, like thawed out with their naive country ways, you know. By the way, there's actually, if people don't know, even though it seems like an off-season episode again, there's actually some pretty spicy topics, because here's the funny thing. I talked about this recently when I just did this. We talked about the whole like Saudi Arabia League of Legends thing a bit on Side Select, the show I do with Rich's Wrath and Foxtrot. And I made the point there that actually one of the reasons I think that podcast is underrated is because we do address topics like that. Like the joke is this is the only other show, unless the Four Horsemen ends up doing something, that this will ever be addressed on in Western League of Legends. Like the stupidest part about that whole topic is, before we get into the actual topic, let's just talk about like the meta component of it appearing in the ecosystem like this. Monty, this is like the #1 story in theory this entire month. It should be everywhere. Every content creator should be scouring it, having their every talk show. This should be the #1 thing. It isn't. And the reason why that's crazy, Monty, is because even though in mainstream sports like football and soccer, where they have a massive amount of the Saudi stuff going on and the live golf and all that, even though in those sports they also like go along with the Saudi agenda, there's loads of fucking media coverage, mate. Like, I don't know if you saw this, when the World Cup was going to happen in Qatar, mate, for 10 years before that, people were doing those stories about the people building the stadiums and it's just that was like a primary part of like the media landscape. So I'm actually shocked that kind of this story come up. And if you notice, people like me, you and Richard have used it to sort of be like, see what you guys thought about this. But aside from that, there's not that much sort of like fanfare. Like, I feel like this should have almost like torn through the scene and like made everyone sort of choose sides or line in the sand moment or something. Because by the way, it is inferred, guys, whether we know yet who's going to work for it or not. Logically, anyone who took a stand against Neom should sort of now be like, well, I'm not going to be involved in this either. But I notice no one said that. I know it's not a single soul has done that move, mate. Because by the way, in a weird way, I'll tell you, this is from personal experience. I obviously can't work with the ESL in case people don't know. based on my own morals, because I publicly made a statement saying I wouldn't work with them until X, Y, and Z conditions were met. They haven't been met. So I'd have to be a total hypocrite and a liar to now work with them. I did that in a way, Monty. I've always said this. That was like me burning the ships when we started Flashpoint. Like, if I hadn't have done that, you think the temptation wouldn't just be 6 months later to go, nah, who really cares about that minor issue there? Like, you have to sort of like decide, do you care about something, and then stick with that route for me. Because like, what do you think about this? Because I thought there'd be way more backlash or discussions, and it feels like there was like 2 days and then it's just sunk below the waves again to me.
So just for the record, I mean, I've said this publicly many times, but in 2023, I was consulting with ESL. Now, I signed I agreed to consult and signed the contract prior to the merger. And then I didn't, I'm not working with them, it was in 2022 I was working with them, not 2023.
Oh, right. Yes.
So it was a while ago. So I didn't work with them really last year. And I'm not working with them currently, but just so you guys know, I did in fact take some of the Saudi money, as it were, myself. I do consulting gigs for a variety of different entities at different times. I have consulting gigs right now that I'm working on, which have nothing to do with any authoritarian governments. But I do think that this is really, as you say, it should be a much larger topic than it ends up being. And credit to the people who have spoken out.
Sure.
I mean, for example, Sideshow, just so you guys know.
Yes, I actually thought his video was excellent. Yeah.
His video was incredibly good. Sideshow is one of my former colleagues from the Overwatch League. He is now a Valorant caster for VCT Americas. And on his channel, you can look it up. He did an entire, I think it's like an hour-long video that kind of debunks all of people's bullshit around Saudi Arabia. And he really just draws a line in the sand himself and says, like, this isn't okay. And I think it's very bold of him.
Just to hit the nail on the head again, he works for VCT, guys, which is Riot Games. Like, this is actually mega edgy to have the balls to come out and do this, but fair play,
Yeah, so really, I do think you guys should go watch that video, and I do think you should leave a comment either on social media or on his YouTube video if you do that and support him, because the more visible support he gets, I think the more people will be likely to kind of join with him. And so,
but the reason also why I think you'll be able to handle his videos is not a really dry video. Like, he does tell you a bunch of news story stuff, but he does it in a fairly palatable way because he's a very amiable character. Like, he actually references himself a Richard Lewis video that has a lot of this info in as well. But fair play that he actually did go and run it down himself. Like, I'll give you a random example to tease you, right? To make you think, well, why would I care about this video? It's not actually about esports. It's about, like, what Saudi Arabia does. I'll give you a random detail he mentions in this video, and this alone will make you think, what? That's not how I heard. So, you hear that famous refrain, Monty. Everyone's heard it. That goes, hey, they're becoming a more progressive country, man. Like, now they let women drive since 2019. The detail Sideshow mentions is that apparently the activists who basically did the campaign that successfully got women to drive were still put in prison themselves.
Great.
If you don't understand that, guys, that is what authoritarian fucking cultures are like. And then also, I'll just throw this out there. There was also loads of cases, which he also mentions, of people, no joke, doing a tweet that's like mildly against the government, Monty. 10 people seeing it and them getting like 29 years in prison. So, like, my point here is, one, this ain't just some minor thing like you thought. And then two, anyone who's sold you this idea that it's sort of like, well, there was some stuff in the past, but they've sort of almost finished and wrapped it all up. It's like not even vaguely close. So again, by the way, I'm not saying whether this should be, you should work in esports, whether you should go to these events. I'm just saying it's certainly interesting material, isn't it? Like, I don't think people knew some of these. I didn't know some of that stuff before Richard revealed it. I remember in a video in the past. Like, I don't know about you, by the way. Here's one thing I wish we could all do, by the way. It's why I actually hate the fact that people have made these stupid statements one way or another without knowing, Monty. It's like, can't we all just admit we don't know everything? Like, if you ask me about a random country I haven't looked into, so Saudi Arabia would have been that like a 2 years ago or something. If you go, what do you think about the way that, I'll pick a random one. What do you think about the way that Jordan handles their rights for women who were divorced? You know what my opinion would be? I don't know anything about that, mate. I wouldn't go, well, here's my super hard opinion. That, like, I don't know anything about it. Like, is it not... And we all pretending we just know everything about every topic, guys. Like, there's plenty of topics I know fuck all about. That's why actually, also to bring it back, that's why I actually hope the industry does address topics like this, because I actually do think in the modern day, it's not that fans are total idiots, Monty. It's that they're not used to taking facts and like connecting them and making a pattern. You have to actually do that like work for them. I'm sorry you do. Like, I've seen it in my videos. You can even just drop a hint. Like, I'll give you a random one, Monty. When I did my interview with Simple in CSGO recently, he actually dropped a couple of like little drama bombs, but because he did it in like a sort of like soft spoken way and he didn't emphasize that it was like a bomb, he just sort of like mentioned like maybe Guardian wasn't injured in the major final where he said he had a bad wrist. But he said it in a way where it's like not a big deal. No one picked up on it. It wasn't even like a big deal. No one even mentioned this detailing. There was like in theory, that's like a scandalous thing to suggest. So similarly, I feel like the problem with these stories is if you just drop the story with all the info, people just go like, so, but what does that mean? Or they say that shit that they all do that I know drives everyone crazy, Monty, where they go, oh yeah, well, what about events in the USA?
God, Jesus.
Please. Because as Richard has pointed out 1 million times, there has never been an event, to my knowledge, where the US government sponsored a tournament. Joe Biden himself was like, I'm overseeing this. And then they actually started just killing people. Listen, guys, I don't want to seem too like, rah, I support America, USA. But I don't remember that happening in esports. I'm just going to put that out there. I feel like I would not only remember, but that might actually be an appropriate moment to take stand against the United States. If they indeed did do that, I wouldn't be on your side then, guys.
Yeah, and
what a silly topic.
Yeah, and by the way, like, I mean, I don't approve of all the things that the U.S. government does, but to your point, they're not running the esports events, guys. Like, yeah, they've done some sponsorships. Like, we've seen the U.S. Army or the U.S. Air Force do some sponsorships for events, and there has been, by the way, very public pushback against that occurring. Like, people have actively discussed how they do not like that, and it has been, especially in Counter-Strike, a big topic of conversation. So yeah, I think there's a lot to kind of unpack here about what's going on, because I'm going to catch everybody up to speed on what exactly this is, because especially League of Legends fans, I don't think would understand what's currently going on, because if you're not paying attention to other esports, the Saudi events that happened this past year were not in League of Legends. So we got to see, PUBG, Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six. They did the Riyadh Masters. They did a massive Dota tournament that had a huge prize pool. So they did PUBG Mobile. They did Tekken. They did Street Fighter. They did StarCraft.
So pretty much every game except League.
And Valorant, except for League and Valorant. So most other esports, like fighting games, FPS games, I think they did Fortnite as well.
Okay.
So so Epic has been involved with this. They did Rocket League as well. So Epic's two titles that run esports competition are Rocket League and Fortnite. They did those. So it's basically kind of all the developers. So it was Valve was involved, Ubisoft was involved, Epic was involved. Just it kind of like wasn't Riot, and then the fighting game companies. So what happened was there was a tournament that took place in Riyadh, and it was called Gamers 8. And Gamers 8, so the total prize pool for this event was $45 million. It ran
for every game combined,
every game combined. So it ran over 8 weeks of competition, and so not everything took place at the same time. So it'd be like 2 weeks of Counter-Strike, and then 2 weeks of Dota, and then so there'd be maybe a couple games running simultaneously. And so there are a lot of things that, obviously, like we have a lot of questions about how this event kind of unfolds. Now, the information that came out of Jacob Wolf's report, which I will link below alongside Sideshow's video, so I will link both of those things in the YouTube description. The thing that kind of came out of this was that basically Riot goes on summer break for a year over July 4th. So this year it is starting on July 1st, their week-long break, and they are going to allow 2 teams per region to go to the newly rebranded Esports World Cup. So that's what it's called now. We don't really have a lot of details about what this is going to look like if players are going to be competing in as their countries, because it's called World Cup. My suspicion is that they're just going to be full teams that go compete, because that's what happened with Gamers 8 last year. And so you might see G2 and T1 and Cloud9 all go there to have a week-long competition against each other. Now, obviously, as a fan, this is going to be very exciting. The production value is really good. The production is done by ESL. So because they are Saudi owned now, so ESL and Faceit, the ESL Faceit group, which is called EFG, which is owned by Savvy Gaming, which is the corporate entity that owns both of those companies and owns EFG. A lot of the ESL producers, a lot of the Faceit producers now work on this event. So you are going to see very good production quality, just as we saw with the event that happened at Gamers 8 last year, because they're willing to throw a lot of money at very cool sets, lots of camera operators, really high-end production. It looks good. It's a well-run event. And Riot has said that 2 teams per region, and they said this internally. These were internal messages that Jacob Wolf got a hold of. And internally, that 2 teams per region could go. Not that they were making any teams go, so it will be voluntary. However, I would imagine that Riot will give priority to teams at the top of the standings by the time July 1st rolls around. And those teams at the top of the standings will probably have the option to go or not. And then if they choose not to go, then the next team in the standings will probably have an opportunity to go. Now, I will say that this event is likely to have a giant prize pool. Now, Riot, a question we're going to have is, will Riot actually allow this event to have a giant prize pool? Because Riot famously has said and acted upon this, which is they say they do not want the prize pool to be a big part of their esport. They want to take that revenue, share it with the teams, and then have the players get higher salaries but lower prize pools. That has been their model since the beginning. So will they allow, for example, this tournament to have a higher prize pool than Worlds? I don't know. One thing that they could do, if Riot says, hey, you can't have a giant prize pool for this event, they may say, but you can pay the teams a stipend away from the public eye for competing, to encourage the teams to compete.
Appearance fee or something, sure.
Yeah, they could, and that money just may not go to the players. It may be just devoured by the teams. Now, obviously, this is going to be extremely attractive to the teams. And even if they don't do this, guys, there was kind of a different, an element that people may not have paid attention to with Gamers 8, which is in addition to all the prize pools for the individual esports, they also had a separate prize pool for teams. And this is really important to know. It was called the Club competition, I believe.
Club Awards or something, yeah.
Yeah, the Club Awards. It was the Club Awards. And they set a $5 million prize pool aside. And basically, in order to qualify for money, a team had to have 2 finishes within the top 8. And then there was a point system that allowed teams, the first place team won up to, I think, $1.5 million. I think
it was $1.5 million, yeah.
Yeah, for first place. And why it's important to tell you this, guys, is that teams that are in other esports, so multi-esport teams that are going to have multiple rosters at this event, if that prize pool, it's already a substantial prize pool, but if that prize pool gets even bigger, it's going to motivate good teams to send their LoL squads, because that's going to get them closer to winning prize purses that I assume, I don't know this for sure, but I assume most teams are not sharing that with the players. They're pocketing 100% of that money. And in the frigid air of esports winter, an extra $1 million padding out your budget, which, by the way, for many of these teams could pay for their entire year of League of Legends expenses, is going to be really attractive. And especially also if the prize pool isn't crazy, but the money instead goes to paying stipends for the teams, which is a possibility. Like they might just pay appearance fees directly to the teams that do not go to the players. the teams are going to be highly motivated. So if you guys are wondering why teams would immediately compromise their morals and things they said publicly, because I think you can tell this story, Thorin, but Team Liquid hilariously walked back on basically everything they had ever said publicly last year in order to send their teams to this competition. Do you want to talk about what happened there?
So, like, first of all, on the G8 thing, I'll just briefly address that. Like, as Monty says, this is actually the secret mechanism behind this event, which I've got to say is very shrewdly put together and reverse engineered, because essentially, if you asked me, Monty, reverse engineer this problem, how do I get all the big esports teams to play in my tournament, even if, for example, they're in a game perfect for League of Legends where they already have a circuit? They don't need to compete in my tournament. In fact, there's a really famous circuit that they do their business in. Well, that's what you do. Like you say, you make this thing where essentially the genius of that prize is, notice, because it's about getting, you've got to have at least 2 placings. It actually just suggests send as many teams and players as you can. And then it's like that thing, get more lottery tickets, like vote early and often. Like you're doing that sort of incentive to the person. And then if people aren't thinking about it, right, the actual orgs Monty's referring to, think about it, there's not that many orgs that are in like one game, like fucking Sentinels or like the odd one, obviously Overwatch, like some of the newer VC people, right? Aside from that, it's all multi-game orgs. So the genius of this is now, unless they have some massive moral, like, a qualm about attending the event, people like G2, Cloud9, Team Liquid, these are the biggest orgs in the world. They're in every game, guys, all the games that these people want. So it mega incentivizes them. And as you said, Team Liquid has already basically led the way and pioneered that no one's going to stand against this, because Team Liquid themselves on a number of occasions have taken moral stances. Like, if people don't know, I think it was when Texas maybe had that like thing where they were saying they were going to make the school, like, say you couldn't like sort of show LGBT stuff to kids or something. When that happened, I think this is what happened. I think Liquid 112 made some sort of a statement where like Team Liquid like sort of apologized to fans or something and suggested something like that they wouldn't feel safe going to like Florida or something. It was quite a strange way to phrase this, right? Or they were speaking against injustice or something. But then the joke obviously is anything you think that Florida's doing, Saudi Arabia is doing times a million, but they still attend events in Saudi Arabia and go to ESL events. So what happened was when the Gamers 8 tournament came along, because they have been an org that has tried to stand in favor of like civil liberties and stuff, and obviously this sort of clashes and gives you some cognitive distance of like, how could they attend the event? Well, it's even worse. They not only attended the event, but it turns out they did an apology tweet again where they sort of were like, sorry, we have to attend the event, but it's esports, like where we're going to get the money from and that, and we're doing. And then in the tweet, this is so meta and next level, it's insane. In the apology, they say something like that they're going to give some money as a donation to like a charity that obviously goes in favor of LGBT stuff. But this is the punchline of it all, guys. And this punchline is so perverse, but it will show you who the esports industry is. It turned out later, I can't remember if it was Richard or someone else who actually found this story, but it was broken as a story. It turned out later that the actual tweet that Team Liquid made qualified, and they knew this, as part of a social media campaign for these orgs attending, and the one that got the most engagement, like from actually counter-signaling the event and seeming like you're the good guys, would then win itself a cash prize or something mad like that, which would have covered the donation. So the joke is, I made this joke privately when people brought this topic up. I said, at what point in time, because they're going to spin that as like, well, at least we're giving some of the money here to a good cause. It's like, at what point in time does that just look like what you actually did was say like, oh, sorry, all like gays and minorities, like we stand in your favor. And then someone's like, what if I give you 10 million? And you're like, how much cut do you guys need? If I give you like $1 million of the 10, is that okay? Like, can I keep the other 9? Like, what do you do? It's almost like that at that point in time. Like, the premise is you either stand with it or against it. Like in this scenario, they just sort of PR'd their way out of it. I will say they got away with it. It's another one of those things where people didn't put 2 and 2 together. But when you actually find that information out on that report, again, I can't remember who did the report. That's kind of, it's pretty eye-raising stuff, but you sort of see the stakes we're playing at here. Because as you say, Monty, this also, like the LCS walkout, it is the worst time ever to ask orgs to take a moral stand on financial grounds. Like, it's the one time in history maybe where they can't do it unless they're going to go bust, right?
Right. And by the way, to describe how that like social media competition worked, they had to use the hashtag for Gamers 8.
Yes,
so it was impression. So by the way, they could have made the statement without using the hashtag, but then they chose to use the hashtag.
That's why it seems obvious that they intentionally also wanted to sort of double dip, as it were. Yes.
Yeah. So it was pretty absurd. And honestly, like, again, all of this would be fine if these orgs hadn't made so many public attempts to stand up for causes, because here's the real test, guys. It didn't cost them any money earlier. In fact, it may have gained them money because they were taking popular stances that would endear their fans to them. So if your org has been doing this, nobody made them do any of these things. In fact, I don't really have an issue with teams competing in this tournament if they didn't say anything previously. But if they were holding themselves to a standard that made their fan base like them and feel good, they better fucking, hew to that standard now, because this is the real test. When the money is there, are you guys going to be the ones taking it? And basically, why this is so complicated is that it really is ingeniously designed because of the club awards, right? The teams are incentivized to go because they realize they can make a lot of money by sending as many divisions as possible. And the players are going to push the teams to go because they're going to see a $5 million prize pool for League of Legends or another game, right? I think that the prize pool is like 10 million for the Dota event. It was huge. It was enormous. It was like 5 or 10 million, I think, just for Dota. And the players are going to see that. And obviously the players are going to want to go. And here's the thing, because the players' salaries have all been cut too. Part of this esports winter.
The prize purse for the Riyadh Masters in Dota was $15 million.
Holy
guys,
shit.
That might be like the prize purse of like some of the earliest like crowdfunded TIs. That's great. 15 million. If you don't know, the CSGO major is 1 million. Fucking hell, 50. I mean, this isn't even TI, by the way, guys. It's like a tournament before TI as well. Like, fucking hell.
Yeah, and that's way more than Worlds, by the way. Way more than Worlds.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
So I don't know if Riot is going to allow them to have a prize pool that big. But it's possible that they will. And it's possible that even if they don't allow the prize pool, they may have made a deal with the Saudis to like just kind of hide some of that money by paying it directly to the teams as an appearance fee that nobody is ever going to hear about unless we break it on this show, basically, or unless there's, Richard Lewis finds out and does a report on it. But that's going to be hard information to get because nobody is going to want to leak that. There's going to be 0 people who really want to leak that information. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a crazy amount of money. And like I was saying...
apparently it was, Richard. It's on his Substack. The title of the article that we were talking about is How Team Liquid Monetized Their Apology for the Riyadh Masters attendance. There we go. It was Riyadh Masters. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the other factors here is that the players are also going to want to go because they are living in a world where many of their contracts have been cut this year as a result of teams not making as much money. More and more players are playing on smaller and smaller contracts. So the opportunity to go and actually win a bunch of additional prize money is going to be really attractive to the players. And the teams are going to want to go because they're going to want part of the club awards, especially if we don't know what the prize pools are going to be. What happens if the club awards, instead of being 5 million this year, is 10 million or 15 million or 50 million? Like, the Saudi government is willing to throw any amount of money in order to have this be a success and to convince people to attend. That is what their goal is.
Oh, mate, I'll tell you right now, if anyone follows soccer, English football, or just your association football, whatever it's called, right? In that sport, if you have seen how they have actually signed players to teams in the Saudi Pro League, right? Like top players from Europe, they just literally, Monty, like you're describing here, they just keep putting the money up until you say yes, literally. Like they go to you, they're like, right, 50 million. You're like, well, maybe. And then they go 75 million. You go, I don't know about that. And then they just keep going until eventually it's like, well, fuck, 450. How can I say no? And eventually even the club's like, yeah, go. Like it's good for all of us. Like we make the money off the transfer. Like they'll do this with esports. Maybe now, maybe the joke is, maybe the initial bit of game is like, they're just testing the waters. But if they need to, they can go to any, if you see the live golf and all the other stuff, they can go to any level they need to. Because the key thing I think people don't understand, Monty, is this. I feel like the area that's sort of lost everyone is when people talk about sports washing. There's 2 quick details to note here, Monty. One, fans have a really silly impression of what it is. They think sports washing, Monty, is Saudi Arabia hands me a big bag of money and then I go, here are the things I think about Saudi Arabia. They are good for this and good for that, and nothing they do is... No, that would be too ridiculous even for them, you idiot. What they do is they hand you a bag of money and you just don't have an opinion about Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
That's genius, because then you can do whatever you want. It's not that people lie and say it's good. They just don't say anything. And which, by the way, the joke of the esports industry is, in esports, they haven't even had to pay a load of people and everyone already says nothing. So that's already working. And then the other detail is, people think, right, this is where I think people have gotten lost, Monty. People, for some reason, have the impression that when we say they're sports washing, that it's just like Saudi Arabia woke up one day and said, oh, I just want to be liked by the West, but for no reason. Because remember, like, these games don't make money. I mean, even those spots they're buying, by the way, initially won't make them much money because they're blowing all this money and it's actually not well monetized. But the part people don't realize is, part of the reason supposedly this is going on is because if you think of the current world we live in, the notion is we're not supposed to, in theory, be like all about oil and the like that type of energy resources, which is obviously their main industry. So I've heard basically the other factor is, it's why you notice simultaneously stuff like Neom and that Line City and stuff is also in the same sort of background of all this, because the premise goes, as far as I know, that they want to turn like their countries and parts of the Middle East almost into like Middle East Las Vegas. I mean, not with obviously the degeneracy angle, but as in like a resort type place that you go to, and it's like a cool place to live. And the reason I give that example, Monty, is just go back, guys, for real, and look at like pictures of what like Las Vegas looked like in 1930 or something. Your mind will be blown. You'll think it was there for a long time. It wasn't. That stuff got built up really quickly. I mean, there's the famous thing of Times Square in New York, you know, the picture where it's like super old fashioned, and then like 100 years later it's got everyone. So I think people are underestimating that the Saudis aren't just doing this for a job. They're trying to like make the whole world sort of pay attention to their region. So this has got way bigger like stakes than esports. Esports is just like one card in the house of cards, right?
Well, you don't even have to use those examples. You can just use Dubai as an example in the same region. Like, think about what Dubai was 30 years ago, and then think about Dubai now. Like, you can do this really quickly. And they're so doing
basically they want like essentially like the Saudi, obviously all of them are involved, the Qataris are all going to get involved, but the Saudis want essentially Riyadh to be the capital of esports. That's the plan in the future. That's why we're going to have Dota there and League there, and eventually the plan is that this will just be the main place everyone has the World Championship. That's what I've heard.
Yep, that is 100% the plan. Like, you know, I think it's very obvious that it's starting here, but the end result of all of this is going to be the Saudi, you know, the Riyadh major. You know, it is going to be TI in Riyadh. It is going to be potentially the World Championship in Riyadh. Like, I don't think that's a crazy thing to say.
That will be the biggest one, by the way, Monty. If they ever get the League World Championships to be there, or even MSI, like that, the problem at the moment as well with this story, if you think about it, is all Riot is doing now, Monty, is allowing like permission to run the tournament. If they ever give their tournament over, though, that's game over, guys. Like, I don't care what any like cope against like the idea that like they've basically violated what they said about Neom, that will be gone the second they ever had the tournament there. And I'm sorry, if you look at where they've had these tournaments, Monty, think about like how many times basically they've gone just back to China over and over again for Worlds. Like, the joke is they actually don't have that many locations to have Worlds. Like, you can sort of roughly do it in Europe. You can do a couple of locations in North America. Obviously, China's mega. Korea has like Seoul and maybe Busan. That's the joke is they'll almost want to do it in fucking Riyadh eventually to be like a cool innovative, and then they're going to get paid a fuck ton when they do it as well, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that, you know, Riyadh just, you know, the Saudi government foots the entire infrastructure bill of the event. And so Riot, all they're paying for is just their staff to go out there and run it, right? You know, these people exist, and you remember that they,
because people probably don't know. Give me a see if you can guess, Monty, because I'm actually genuinely asking. I don't know. If you had to guess, just so people get a sense of the scale, how much do you think Worlds costs to put on for Riot? If you had to just ballpark it, what sort of figures are we talking about here?
100 million.
See, I'm not joking. I guarantee fans think it's like 5 million or 10 million. Like, Monty's right, by the way. Even just big Counter-Strike events are like 1 million. There's that story of the homestand in fucking Overwatch, like 3,000 fans used to cost 1 million to run. Monty's right, by the way. You don't understand how expensive Worlds is, guys. It's bonkers. It's why, by the way, secretly, the point Monty's made all these years is definitely true. Riot definitely makes insane bank off League of Legends esports. That's why they're willing to run a 100 million tournament and then go like, don't allow crowdfunding, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's obvious they're making insane money hand over fist in this game.
I think if you look at the cost of, especially like the spectacle that they put on, you know, the huge concerts, getting all the famous people to appear.
I'll bet that fucking dragon thing, the augmented reality, was probably like $1 million itself or something ridiculous, wasn't it? I bet that was insane. Yeah,
at least.
But I mean, think about, but it's so expensive.
Like, think about how much it costs to get like Imagine Dragons or Lil Nas X, to these events. It's not cheap.
Yes.
Like, you're probably paying them $1 million just to show up.
Yep.
Like, I know factually
for their song and all that shit. Think about it. Imagine Dragons. They were like real chart songs that were getting fucking licensed for the event.
Yeah. I know that, for an example, DJ Khaled got paid $500,000 to do that Overwatch League final. And that was nowhere near as, it wasn't like Lil Nas X is doing, a custom song for them, right? And they have the music video that they've got to make. I mean, it is, and then you also have to move, it's the cost of moving all of that equipment and all of those people from city to city, setting up new venues, pre-production. I mean, the salaries of all those people that are there, day rates for all the casters, like, it would not surprise me if Worlds was $80 to $100 million. That would not surprise me at all.
Oh, by the way, I'll give another detail that I haven't seen mentioned on a lot of shows. You know, one of the annoying things about this topic, it's why actually, for real, Monty, I'm not joking. I don't think it is just moron fans. I think some of this is like astroturfing, where some of these accounts are like industry plants and they're just doing this to
they're Saudi plants.
Because, mate, some of the like whataboutism, like I said about the one about, what about the USA? That's the moron, right? Here's the one that isn't, though. The one that I can tell is the plant, because no normal fan would think this, is, the people who keep saying, like I said about they're getting more progressive angle. The ones who say, oh, but by doing business with them, we're going to actually influence them and that we're going to shape them to our Western values. And they're showing by letting the people drive and, at these tournaments that they're willing to sort of come and meet us halfway. The reason, one, like no fan would think of that angle, by the way, Monty. That's come from, I can hear the cogs turning in the focus group of but how do we spin this so it's a good thing? So they've done that. And then secondly, here's why I know that isn't true, Monty. Because not only did I point out, if you go watch Sideshow's video, there's even areas where they claim actually the country's gotten worse under this new regime. And some people think it was worse than the past ones. But if you just look in esports, we've already seen a couple of examples that show they are not in any way making concessions to our values. So I'll give you an example. So obviously, they can't just openly at the tournament, Monty, be like, we're here at Gamers 8, no Israeli people. They can't do that because that would be an international incident. But because, and this is before all the stuff that happened recently in Israel and Palestine, because obviously, surprisingly, Israelis aren't always popular in Middle Eastern countries for reasons that you will now obviously very readily be aware of in light of what happened since, right? When the players for Vitality, for example, they have 2 Israeli players and they're the best Counter-Strike team. When they were at Gamers 8, supposedly they had to have personal security. And then I think something mad, I think Richard or someone mentioned this, that it was implied that they would even do stuff like maybe cut crowd mics when these Israeli players were playing, so in case the fans were booing them when they came out on stage, or essentially just being kind of low-key a bit shitty. So the reason I bring that up is because if you actually were trying to do the Western values thing, you'd almost come out to the crowd and go, hey guys, remember, we don't hate these guys, and let's all be cool to them. So they didn't do that. And then the second detail is this, right? This is the biggest smoking gun of them all, guys. So remember the original way I was able to meme on everyone with the Saudi shit is that obviously the Saudi shit came days or a month after the fucking ESL Women's League was announced, wasn't it? The ESL Impact League. Well, the biggest smoking gun of all is this. There is no Saudi team in the fucking Women's League because, spoiler, their women don't play esports games. That's the dumbest part of it all. They don't even, not even just as a gesture, put a team in their own tournament, for fuck's sake, guys. So, I'd go ahead and say, without knowing these people, it doesn't seem actually like they're the ones that are coming to our side. In fact, are you ready, Monty? This might really blow your mind. If there's 2 of us, right, you are someone who would like a lot of money. I have a lot of money. Who will be more shaped by our transaction in which I give you a lot of money? I don't think this one's that hard not to crack, is it, guys? It's obviously the other way around. We're obviously compromising to their values, aren't we? That goes without saying, guys. In fact, if anything, this is actually a more serious point, actually, as to why I despise these sorts of things, as in not just the event, but this whole fanfare of is it the right politics, is it not? Because in a way, this is even more perverse to say that you do support something and then all your actions do the opposite. Are you even, in this case, as the Frankie example, you're even directly working for and funding the people you say you stand against in the world. That's, to me, I know it's partly because I'm autistic, but I can't handle cognitive dissonance. I wouldn't be able to sit in a room like that, Monty. I'd have the 2 things would be grinding up against each other in my mind. I've got to resolve this somewhere. So I'm lucky I've resolved my life, but I don't know how everyone else handles this. I think it's crazy, mate. What a world.
Yeah. and we're also going to see what happens with the casters, because I tweeted out it'll be interesting to see who's casting this event, because obviously Riot's not going to force anybody to cast a third-party event. And I will say in the past, what Riot has done with ESL run events, and this will be an ESL run event, is that they didn't actually pay the casters to more money to attend like IEM Katowice. They basically did it for free, which was extremely shitty of Riot.
It's mental, isn't it? I know, it's so mental.
No,
especially because, by the way, we're not talking about like 2011. We're talking about still like 2015 and
2014,
stuff like that.
2015.
We're past the days when people get paid a day rate, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was considered, basically they said like, you don't have to do this, but also ESL can't pay you if you do it.
By the way, shout out to Riot. As much as people have given Riot credit for all the stipends, the prize purses, all the money they have given in esports, I've never seen any single entity, like Monty described earlier, who just sits around going, I don't think you should be able to make money, or just over and over again in esports. And then has the goal to turn around when we're all like broke in esports, we're like, please give us some money, paid. They're like, you're bloody irresponsible with it. You should monetize your industry. So you're stopping us. Riot stopped about half the money coming into their game.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, guys, is that like shithousery hasn't stopped recently. I mean, I can tell you guys that even in the last few years, when there have been third-party, I have to be careful about how I say this, when there have been third-party opportunities for Riot casters, Riot hasn't prevented them from getting paid, but what Riot has done is talked to the third-party hosts and said, you cannot pay this person more than we pay them.
Fucking hell.
Which, by the way,
just
guys,
for the arbitrary reason, not for some just because they want to be the people who pay the most. That's it.
They don't want the casters to get it in their heads that they're worth more money somewhere else. And by the way, guys, that is illegal.
Can I just state something? Do people not understand? Even that type of a thinking and conversation is like some fucking A Christmas Carol level, like robber baron cunt level. Like, I don't want people to make money and be free from my power. Like, this makes it sound like we in League of Legends, we are all like fucking matchstick girls in a factory in Victorian England as Mr. Riot comes in with monocle on. I don't know about these bloody workers and their wages and rights and stuff. This is outrageous. That it actually sounds like some fucking super evil.
It's illegal.
Like, no.
It's illegal, Thorin, is what it is. It is illegal wage fixing, is what it is.
Yes.
And you know, people might wonder how Riot gets away with this. Well, Riot just says, if you don't do what we say, we're pulling the license for this event. Or you can't use this caster, right? So and obviously, you know, the people who are running third-party events want to continue working with Riot. So they're just like, I don't care if we pay this guy less, right? Or I don't care if we pay this guy this amount. What the fuck do they care? They were probably going to pay more as a day rate. So like, oh, well, cheaper for me, whatever. But it is illegal. And Riot does engage in these practices. And I have firsthand information about this. Firsthand. The people who are on these calls when people from Riot said these things. So yeah, it is it's bad. And why I'm making this point is that with the Saudi thing, one of the reasons why casters might go is because casters are offered a ton of money to attend these events. Like, day rates are as I understand it, day rates were much higher than normal at Gamers 8. Is that true from your info as well?
I mean, I'm not certain, but as far as I know, like, put it this way, they would be at least the best day rates, I would imagine.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know if Riot is going to allow that, but if you see kind of a mass defection of casters, I think you have to start questioning that. You know, if there is more money going to those casters' pockets, because if Riot doesn't intervene in the way that they have previously, then I think that there's a probability that the paychecks that are going to be put in front of some of these people, some of these casters to attend this event are going to be enormous.
I mean, I'll give you another angle no one's thought of on this for League specifically, Monty. This is one of those areas where that game that Riot has played specifically with the LEC. So when I say that, you're going to know what I'm talking about now, where they have like a massive talent team and then a few people are like permanently on the show. But then every week or two, some people would come in, like Troublelink would come in, or Frankie would come in, or Machine would come in. And, you know, people would be like brought in everything, or Dagda before he became full time, right? That approach, right? Remember, part of that is about paying people less, keeping rates down, scarcity, etc. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're one of those casters, there's a world where some of them, by the way, might even have moved to fucking Berlin and have like a year's lease. Well, if you're the guy where it's like, well, how many weeks am I getting this week? Am I getting like 4 weeks in LEC? Like maybe I'll get like planes at like an MSI or something. You're the guy where you're almost financially incentivized to need to take this deal. Like, one, you get some more camera time. That's always an incredibly valuable currency to a caster. And secondly, you might get like even better day rates. This might actually pay for the rest of your year. This might even become a way to offset the costs of talent even.
It's also, I mean, yeah, it might be, because you could make as much money in a week as you make in 6 months or a year. That's definitely a possibility. Yep. Like, I don't think it's outrageous to think that they might pay casters, you know, $30,000, $40,000 for a week to attend this event if they really, really want somebody.
Yep. Especially if you're a big name. Like if you were someone like Cadril, by the way, you could probably get 100K if you want. If you have the right agent,
way more.
Get mega paid for
way more. Yeah. You could get way more. I mean,
any of these people, LS, they could go fucking ham on this.
I think it's Scump from Call of Duty, who's also been like doing some work as like promoting this stuff, and like. Yeah, I mean,
why doesn't it surprise me that one of Hex's boys, if you don't know, Hex would always be all over this shit, get like the best. He'd be the one getting that deal. Like, yeah, I want more, 2 million. I know he does know what he's doing. Fair play.
Yeah, fair play. So you know, they will go after the biggest influencers in order to do this. Like having Cadril there co-streaming is probably something that they want, if I had to guess, right? They, you know, they'll be aggressive about getting who they want for this event. And I think the only way they get people there is if they offer a lot of money. But even if they offer, just like you say, even if they're capped by Riot at offering something like that, if you're a smaller caster, first off, that could be a lot of money. But second off, it's incredible exposure. Because the top teams in the world will go there. You think the Chinese are Korean?
The other part people forget is this, Monty. I feel like the way they phrased it was very clever there. Because, you know, in the press release, when you read that they say, like, you know, from each region will allow 2 teams. It even says something like allow or something, Monty. But the way it's phrased doesn't sound like that crazy. When I read that, I remember just thinking, you are aware this is the format of MSI. You're going to allow 2 teams from each. That is what has made, in my opinion, MSI the best tournament in League of Legends. Like, if they actually allow the best teams, this could be an amazing. Yes. By the way, as an aside, this could actually be dope for League of Legends. It could be amazing.
It's going to be a good tournament. Like, I promise you guys, if this goes forward, because you know who's not going to care? The Chinese and Korean teams, guys. They're not going to give a shit about this. And so. At the very least, we're going to have a really good China versus Korea tournament. Yep. And it's just a matter, like, at that point, I don't really even care if the European or North American teams go. Like, if I get a banger top 2 from China, top 2 of Korea, I'm going to watch that. Like, we're going to talk about it on the show. That's just how it's going to go.
Of course, yeah. Of course.
And so they're going to get a good event out of this. And for back to the caster point, if you're a minor caster and other casters decide to turn this down, you all of a sudden are thrust into a situation where you could be casting a best of 5 finals that is on par with an MSI or a Worlds finals.
Oh, and mate, you could actually just be casting like fucking BLG versus like T1 in a best of 5 on LAN. Like, who the fuck's turning that down if you're a guy who gets like 1 week on LEC? Who the hell would turn that down?
Yeah.
Remember, for Worlds itself, Monty, there's not that many people have actually done a final. Think of it, it's still like kept super rare, isn't it? Like, imagine just getting to go and do the whole event. That'd be so attractive.
Yeah, so even as a person who is trying to get more eyeballs on you or prove your worth, even if the money is the same, if Riot says, oh, you can't get paid more than your day rate, think about what it could do to have a massive final that everybody is going to watch, because it's going to be super compelling.
Monty, this is all fictional, guys. This is purely in our minds. None of this happened, and any likenesses to people alive or dead are purely coincidental, even though I'm about to say the name Proscorin. So imagine the event happens. It's like Saudi, you know, fucking Riyadh Esports World Cup 2024. All of a sudden, you know, the lights dim in the arena as if they've been cut the power. All of a sudden you hear, it's like the Undertaker, like, dong, and you just hear like, I'm not here to look nice for your eyes. Is that Frostgoran's music? Frostgoran just comes in like $4 million sign in. She's like fucking abseils in onto the stage. We're going to change a lot of values and a lot of opinions in the West, guys. And then just fucking, there you go. It's off at that point in time. Because, by the way, I actually have a more serious point. Because the good thing about this, by the way, is at the end of the convo, we'll just segue into talking about the LEC talent. It'll be the perfect segue, won't it? I actually have a bigger topic I want to talk with you about on this exact issue, though, Monty, which is, I'm not even joking, even though people might think, because of what I've just said, that I'm loving this, right? Because obviously I'm not working with the Saudis currently. But if Frankie does anything, if Frostgoran does anything, if some of the LEC talent do, I can just dunk on them all day. Believe it or not, guys, I know this is going to really blow your mind. I dunk as a way to cope with how fucking destructive the whole industry is and how it's full of people who are fucking morons who do the opposite of what they say they will while morally judging me. I don't like that. I wish I wasn't in that scenario. If I could actually press a button right now, which is the topic I was going to bring up with you, and all it does, Monty, is it just retcons history. So history happens the exact same way, but all I did when I pressed this button is delete every public opinion any talent gave on this Saudi topic. I would press that button instantly, Monty. Instantly. Yeah. Because the reason why is it's so stupid. And here's why. Because I would understand this one scenario for making a massive public statement. Either one, I know this is going to really blow your mind, Frankie. If you really did, in a tangible, real-world sense, really care about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, if you did, that would be a great reason to speak out. But spoiler, I'll even say this, and I always have. I, hypothetically, if I think about it as a topic, care about it, and I don't want people to be abused and bullied, etc. But I don't live even vaguely close to that part of the world, Monty. On a real, like, everyday level, I don't really care about it. I care about my family, my part of the world, my country. After that, like, my country has 60 million people in it. I can't expand it too much beyond that, guys. Like, I think that's enough for me. 60 million, my family, my region. So I don't even pretend to do it. But if you really did, if you like, maybe you had family there or something, that'd be a great reason to do it. The other aspect, though, is this. If you actually were a full-time employee of, say, Riot Games, that would be a great reason to have to say, hey, I'm against what my employer's doing. Like, I won't work. My problem is this. In both Counter-Strike and League, most of these people are just contractors. They are short-term contractors. Some of them literally getting these gigs like we're going to talk about the LEC, split by split. The idea these people not only are making crazy great pronouncements that could affect their whole career, but even worse, the idea they're even obliged to have an opinion. I think that's so stupid. Because what we're doing basically, Monty, is instead of actually hauling Mr. Team Liquid or Mr. Riot Games over the course, we're hauling like the fucking face we see on camera who gets paid a day rate, then fucks off and might not even be on the next broadcast. To me, that like the stakes are too high for talent, if you know what I mean. I know they've done it themselves, Monty, but that's why I say I would press that. But even though, by the way, it would help out people like Frostgoran and Frankie and that, I'd still press it because I think it's just so, this is like literally the definition of play stupid games, win stupid prizes, isn't it? Like, what was the point of all this? So sad, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know what's going to happen too, which is that there's going to be some bullshit where, there's going to be some sort of like lolesports.com article where the author is LoL esports staff that announces
that's my
this.
one trigger, I know. That's so Orwellian, Riot. Like, you don't even actually have autonomous human beings who can be named who write these articles. Like, that sounds like you've used ChatGPT, like, by LOL esports stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Who wrote it? Tell me who wrote this article.
I mean, from the Jacob Wolf article, we also know who is the one who is messaging this decision at Riot, which is Chris Greeley. Chris Greeley is the former LCS commissioner. He has been promoted. He is the one, according to Jacob Wolf, who has been messaging this around internally. Do we know if he made the decision or is he just the messenger? No.
Monty, I have to mention the punchline to this exact story about the messaging internally that Jacob Wolf revealed on Twitter. Apparently, one of the people who internally is a leader for like the equity and like diversity and LGBTQ movements, they were in favor of this, defending this move. Like, you'd think surely, guys, behind closed doors, that's the guy fighting against it. But like, no, even behind closed doors, they're like, we really should take the money. They're like, what's going on? What is this?
So I just think it's outrageous because according to what Jacob said, it's because these people believe that players in the Middle East should get opportunities too, which doesn't make any sense because I
love it. That's so mad.
No one's denying
them are the Saudis. The joke is they already could be. Remember, dude, I'm just going to point this out right now, Monty. Spoiler, I'll tell you one thing already that people didn't really think through, Monty. They didn't think this through at all. You know what used to be called the EULCS? What's the region called now, Monty?
EMEA.
They already put the Middle East in there before, you idiots. They actually prepared the way for that. And then also the other factor is like, Oh, what was it you just said just before this? Fuck, what was it? What were you on there? What were you saying just before I mentioned that?
Oh, talking about the leak and how the people were saying that the players wouldn't get an opportunity?
Oh, that was it. Yeah. The other part that's so stupid is, like I just pointed out, at the moment, the number one group stopping certain players in Saudi Arabia from playing esports games is their government. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, this is. By the way, I've got a question for you. Here's actually a very real, like, hypothetical question. I don't know the answer to. If someone does, please answer it. Would you even be allowed as a woman in Saudi Arabia to organize a women's tournament? I think by the way, I think that's a pretty interesting question, isn't it? GG for all fans. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a pretty interesting question to ask. Would you, like, not has someone attempted to, but would you even, like, would you get stopped? Would there be some sort of punishment? Would there be any religious angle? I don't know. Like, I actually suspect you wouldn't be allowed to do it if I had to guess.
Yeah, I have no idea.
What do you think on this talent thing? What do you think on that angle, Monty, of like the contractor angle? What do you think?
I mean, I agree with you that I think it's shitty that people who have zero job security have to make moral stands on this when, or
here's a question for you. Do you actually think they, because you know some of these people better than I do. Do you think they actually like, here's the problem. Like the best example for me is the Frankie one, right? Just 'cause I know her from Counter-Strike. On some level, Monty, if you sat her down and in like a movie, you gave her like the truth serum, I think she would tell you she does care about those topics. I don't think she's actually lying, by the way. It's just she sort of is having a cake and eating it. She on the one hand cares, but then she doesn't like care enough to do X or Y. Do you actually think it's the same with the talent? Like they're not just doing it to be cynical in all cases, right? Some of them probably do believe this shit, right?
I think some of them won't go. I, for example, just based on what he said publicly, like I would be surprised if Medic went, for example.
Oh, you'd think he would be the number one person who shouldn't go. Him and Frostgorian should never be at this event at all in any context. You'd think, yeah, sure, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah, I don't know if some of the other people.
By the way, if I had to guess, people, this is where I'm not cynical. I actually would believe Medic wouldn't go. I mean, remember, I was giving him credit for this. He did himself when people said, as the what about Riot? When the Carlos thing, he just said, well, yeah, fuck Riot and whoever did the sexism there. So he's actually stood by his principles so far. Fair enough.
Yeah. As for everybody else, I don't know. I think it's a really hard decision to make because, I mean, the reason why this works, guys, is because this is an unwinnable situation. It's like for what you guys don't know, I'm going to briefly go over this. What they did to golf, professional golf, is fucking crazy. So the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, was the main circuit that professional golf was, right? And then the Saudis decided to form a competing circuit called Live Golf, LIV. And then what they did was, as Thorin said earlier with some of these soccer players, they started to sign professional golfers to insane contracts. And the president of the PGA denounced the Saudi government and said, and a lot of the professional golfers who stayed with the PGA said they were going to take smaller deals in order to continue with the PGA and stay away from this money. And what happened was Live Golf, because the Saudi government has way more money than the PGA, they basically just spent the PGA into oblivion. And so eventually the PGA was getting so dominated by Live Golf and they couldn't keep up with the insane burn because the Saudi Arabian government did not care about losing money. The PGA very much cared about not being bankrupt because there was an infinite amount of money that the Saudi government was going to spend in order to control the world of professional golf. And what ended up happening was they merged. PGA and Live Golf merged, and now the Saudis own it. And the president of the PGA walked back all his opinions and then joined up with the new combined entity, and here we are. So, you know, when we talk about esports, now I don't know if a lot of the casters have paid enough attention to other sports and world events to like realize this, but if you want to work in esports as a career, it is so dangerous right now to say anything about the Saudi government because that will preclude you potentially from working with ESL. It might preclude you from working with certain developers because remember, all the developers are sending their games there now. So if you are an esports professional and you're like, I don't like this, I'm going to jump ship to Epic Games, and Epic Games needs to hire you for an esports related position, that might cause you to need to travel to Saudi Arabia to oversee the event. You know, you can refuse to go and cast, but who knows what the future holds, right? Who knows if LEC is just headquartered in Riyadh someday and like you have to live there. Like, I don't know what, you know, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Give me an angle on why I don't think you can avoid the Saudi thing. There's actually a story from last year that everyone's forgetting, Monty. Do you remember last year? The story was that like Astralis almost sold 2 Falcons, this Saudi org that's doing all the big moves in Counter-Strike. The story was that at the last moment, Riot like decided, we won't approve this sale, basically. Well, basically, I've heard that is what is going to be the next stage. So they're buying the tournament organizers now and set up the infrastructure. And the next move is buy and set up multiple Saudi orgs. So the other factor people aren't thinking about is this, Monty. Imagine this. Imagine because you've made a statement, you now can't work the events. You now can't like go to the events. So then maybe you take a different gig in the industry. I'll work for Team X. Team X just got bought by the Saudis. Well, then I'll go work for Team Y. What do you do, by the way, if the top 10 orgs, 5 of them sell out to the Saudis? What do you do then? Like, the point is, like you say here, this is why the Neom thing was like the vanguard of all this, because people acted like that was the entire war and that they won the war. No, that was just battle one. And unfortunately for you, it seems like if you look how many battles there might be, it's an unwinnable war unless you're willing to leave esports. I think those are the stakes to some people, you know.
Or you go do your own thing like we're doing with Last Free Nation.
Sure.
Like, yeah, I mean, like, the thing is that this is also why, guys, we appreciate your support, because Last Free Nation,
yes,
we didn't intend for that name to actually be literally true. It fucking sucks that name is literally true, guys.
It's supposed to be like a joke as a name, I know, exactly. It does feel like eventually, though, like the whole world's going to be shut down, and we're just like the only like free state, like, you know, trying to like survive on our own, you know.
So, you know, we're trying here, and this is why these conversations can only happen on this network, despite them being incredibly important to discuss. As it relates to esports, because everyone else is just going to shut the fuck up because the money is too good.
Hotline League must have been a banger, guys. How was that? Let me know. Hit me up when that segment happens.
Yeah, it's too dangerous for everybody to talk about because everyone else has interdependence. We actually have we've built our own little castle on a hill, and we're just inside the walls right now, and nobody can fuck with us. So we're in a very fortunate position, but everyone else, unless you actually took a big risk to go build your own thing, it's very difficult to say no to this money because you don't know how much of an effect it's going to have on the rest of your life. To be fair, Thorin, we don't know what effect being critical of this is going to have on the rest of our lives or our ability to participate within this industry. It could be disastrous, and especially for any casters. Like for example, if you're a Counter-Strike caster and you're contracted to ESL, remember, ESL is directly controlled by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. If you start refusing to go to events, do you think you're going to get a contract with ESL for non-Saudi events? Like, that's a big question. That's a big question. Like, do you just get completely kicked off the circuit? Oh, okay, well, then you go to Blast. What happens when Saudi Arabia buys Blast?
I also feel like we have to make a distinction that maybe fans won't understand, which is when it comes to this sort of a scenario, it's not as simple as just like, like you say, it's not as simple as like, well, as talent, I just only want to work IEM Sydney. I don't want to work whatever the game is, tournament is, ESL, right? Because actually, like, the obvious angle is, this is where I feel like the distinction is this, Monty. There are a small group of people, like we just referenced, Cadril, LS, Dom. These people are bigger than even casting and even certain elements of esports. They maybe could write their own ticket. Like if they wanted to work for the Saudis, but not go to they could probably do it. The difference is, if you're just talent on these events we're talking about, you might mistake them as being as famous. They're not. They're reliant on that broadcast. And quite frankly, they won't be granted by the Saudis the option of like, well, you can have all the money, but not attend the event. Like that it's all. I actually think there's another thing that they've done that's shrewd. I think the big people will get certain concessions and be allowed to stuff, but the normal people, you're just gonna have to do what they say, of course. There's no way they're going to make you special concession, because eventually it is going to seem like, what's the reason you choose not to attend our event? That's going to be an obvious eventual question, isn't it? And it's going to seem bad if it's because I don't, like, you can't get paid for them. Well, I secretly disagree with everything about your country and how it's done. Like, that can't be the answer. So it's a kind of a dark future if you've got on this train, by the way.
Yeah, and needless to say too, I mean this sucks for a lot of the people who are Saudi Arabians in Saudi Arabia, because everyone I know who has been there has had a lovely time, right? They're taken care of extremely well. It's not
Dubai. Everyone says it's amazing. Yeah,
it's not the Saudi citizens' fault that their government chooses to be this way, and they can't criticize it either. So even if they don't feel comfortable about it, but for all these people have been incredibly hospitable. So it's not to say anything negative about the average people in Saudi Arabia. They are in some ways as much of a victim of this as the other people who visit there, or anybody else. So it's just a really shit situation.
By the way, you can argue, Monty, they're far. I'll actually use the USA example. Look, the USA, again, I will reiterate, has never had the fucking leader of the country and like the actual country itself buy, purchase and operate tournament organizers and then enforce values on them. So even though that's never happened, my point is, like, in that scenario, like the actual like American people, theoretically, if you believe democracy is real and there are real elections, would be more culpable than the Saudi people are now, because logically the Saudi people aren't voting these people in that sense, are they? Like, it's a fucking autocratic family that just runs the country. Like, in that sense, by the way, the Saudi guy just happens to live inside this big, like, sort of like fucking Saudi prison, as it were, in that sense. Like, he isn't choosing all this stuff. In fact, he has no say from the bottom up, as far as I can tell. So I don't blame the people at all, mate. This is why the most important part of this situation isn't even about the country Saudi Arabia. It's that, as Sideshow pointed out in his video, it is literally the people in charge of these bad things being done that people say they're against, who are the ones who own and are operating these spots. That's the biggest problem. It's that you can't, there is no abstraction. The abstraction even is just like, well, it's this company that I own, that he owns, but I still say what happens. Like, that's barely even abstract. That's more like just like a fucking forwarding address for an email, guys. Like, it still comes from the same place at the back. So to me, that's the angle people are missing, is that, like, you can't ignore that. This is that's the craziest thing. This is top down from a country, what we're seeing now. So it's like nothing. By the way, that's also why I sort of get why fans get lost on this. It is a really like complicated, nuanced topic. Like, it's not immediately obvious what's going on here. That's why we've unpacked so many like social and historical issues. There is a lot to it, I will say. It's why I said earlier on, don't pretend you know about this topic. I didn't until I looked into it, by the way. This is one of those topics I knew nothing about. Same as when Richard told me some of the stuff about China a few years ago. I'd never looked into that topic. It's not my field. I'm not an expert on that,
Yeah. And we did have to kind of discuss all the layers of this, especially because League of Legends fans may not be aware of what happened with Gamers 8 or what
Strike and all the other games. Exactly. Yeah. And Dota and that course.
Yeah. Or, you probably, if you're a LoL fan, you might have not even known Gamers 8 existed. Whereas like if you were a fan of Rainbow Six or Counter-Strike or Fortnite or Tekken or Street Fighter or StarCraft or any of, Dota, any of these other games, you probably at least heard of the events that were happening at Gamers 8. And then if you did hear about Gamers 8, you might not have heard the announcement that was made about, now it's called the Esports World Cup, but it is in fact still Gamers 8. It's still going to be happening within that same time period. So I hope this was informative for you guys. I think we've covered pretty much everything as it relates to this topic. And like I said, this is the important work that we can do on Last Free Nation. In addition to doing hopefully good game analysis and entertaining content for you guys, we can have the conversations that are really difficult to have within this industry, because everyone else is just going to shut the fuck up. And I promised you guys that Riot sent out a message and tried to muzzle everybody who was going to say anything, which is why also credit to Sideshow, right, for releasing that video. And I will again link that video below so you guys can go look at it. And by
the way, even though I understand, unless someone likes Valorant, he's not in a game you're covering. He came from Overwatch. He does Valorant now. I will just say, in general, I actually think if you're looking for someone to follow esports stuff, I already was a fan of Sideshow anyway. I thought he was really good. But on these topics, he has actually been an extraordinary individual of character, because I can tell you, he also did a very interesting video, Monty, after the whole Carlos G2 thing. And his video was the only one I saw that contained nuance, like pointing out the point I tried to make, which is, it was actually Sideshow made made this point. That's where I got it. That he actually observed that if you look at the actual reaction to the Carlos thing, it was actually more like esports people were reacting to Andrew Tate, but because he's not in esports, they were trying to punish Carlos for who the Tate guy was, essentially. It was like they were using him as a proxy. And so he made a whole video. And by the way, I hope people understand this. The game Sideshow is in and the world he even operates within, that is like the sort of topic you do not discuss, by the way. You're supposed to all be aligned on the fact that like Carlos is pure evil and it's all wrong. It seems on this story he's supposed to say nothing. So he is actually going out of his way, by the way, to give you sort of like a nuanced take here. And I actually appreciate people who can do that, Monty. Like, even if they themselves have their own bias, they can like still lay it out, like sort of say how they see it and actually say like the real thing. And even if it means you have to point out something uncomfortable about your side, you do it. So I thought, yeah, fair play. These are two instances now I've seen him put himself on the line completely. No one obliged him to say anything, but he just went, he did these very well put together videos where I thought he made great points.
Yeah, you guys also probably saw him on the Four Horsemen as well.
Oh, true. Yes.
Yeah, we did an episode with him where he was also very good. So definitely somebody I think that deserves your attention.
Yes.
All right. I think
the segment's obvious, isn't it? So since we're talking, by the way, the other thing as well I will point out is the main reason we've constantly sort of implied this is about like EULCS/LEC Talent is they're the ones who publicly took the stand against Neom. Don't worry, by the way, it does include like LCK staff, LPL people, LCK. If any of those people work the event, it's the same thing. But obviously, EULCS/LEC was where this story came from with Neom 3 years ago. And it's been announced that the talent have come out for this year. So the joke is, this is like a wanted poster and you can circle off all the people who work on game. No, it's just a joke. Don't do that. That was a good joke though, wasn't it? But basically, the talent's been announced. So give me some initial thoughts on this month.
Hold on. Before we do that, Thorin, I do have to put this in here right now, which is that we do have another sponsor to shout out real quick, guys. Again, if you like LFN existing, then please support our sponsors because they are the reason why we continue to be able to have these shows. And HelloFresh is back. They're back once again with us. Great time to get on the wagon if you are in a New Year's resolution, trying to be a little bit more healthy, obviously, because what it is a meal kit service, and they send you pre-portioned ingredients. Usually only have to have a few things like, I don't know, salt, pepper, olive oil, butter, things you would have in your house, hopefully. Hopefully you're not that degenerate. If not, very easy to acquire. And they'll send you an easy-to-follow recipe card. They've got a variety of different meals. I used this service of my own volition when I was in the States, and I really loved it. Wish they did it here in Korea, and I will get back on it as soon as I'm there. So, also, you guys, just as an aside, one thing about HelloFresh, I know some of you have been trying to use this code of ours internationally, and I have been told that this code does work in many places internationally. Oh, okay. So, but if this code doesn't work, because HelloFresh does offer services in a lot of European countries, for example, and other places around the world, if it does not work, if you could please leave a comment either on YouTube or tweet at us at LastFreeNation and tell us where it is not working, we can then tell HelloFresh and try and get it to work for you. Right. Okay? So I need your help on this one. Please go and do that because a lot of people have been very interested in this content for us, and we are interested in you having it. So it does actually save you a lot of time because it just gets delivered. You don't have to do as much meal planning. You don't have to go to the grocery store. It's healthier than eating delivery. It's cheaper than eating delivery because there are no delivery fees. It's part of what you pay for. There's no tips if you're American. And you can get 15-minute meals that you can prep quickly for lunch. And they also have breakfast in there, which is our code right now. We'll help you out with that. You go to HelloFresh.com/LFNfree and use code LFNfree for free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/LFNfree with code LFNfree. So there you go, guys. I love this. They've got lots of options like keto options, calorie smart options.
All the different diet plans, sure, yeah. By the way, another thing I'll say, look, I'll do it in a legit way. I'm not going to be slimy, but like, I'm not going to say it'll make you better at the game, but I will say eating like fast food and just having takeaways all the time is going to make you worse at the game. It's going to put you think about how lazy you feel after a giant burger or something like this. Put it this way, I think this myself in my workday, Monty. If I have a big workday ahead of me, I'll intentionally not have a takeaway. I'll try and have some like rice and chicken or something, something that I know will be nice and clean and just get me going and have like a nice fuel source. So I think if you're a gamer, by the way, this sort of thing's perfect. You can have like 20 minutes between your solo queue games and go make a little noodle dish or something and come back, right? It's going to be a banger.
Yeah. And also on our last episode, on a previous episode, I should say, we also shouted out Factor, which is the same company as HelloFresh. They just make the pre-made meals for you. So if you don't want to cook, there's also that option as well. So you guys can check out other content for that and our code there. But yes, thank you to HelloFresh. Really like them. And you guys have been doing a great job of supporting them. So continue to do so. And please, 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 please let us know if the code isn't working for you so we can try and fix that problem. But it should work for most of you around the world. Cool.
Right, if we're going to talk about the talent, Monty, here's my question. Can you put the image on screen? This image from this tweet here, which is just a picture of all the talent. Maybe because if you show it there, people will keep it in mind as we're talking about it. Otherwise, I think they'll forget who it is. And isn't mentioned. You should be able to put it in an OBS, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I will. Just give it. It'll have to screenshot. Just give me a moment, please. And
while he's doing that, I'll just read out the list while he does that. So basically, the list of people for the LEC winter split, remember, just the first split, is Broxer, Dagda, Dracos, Eragon, who's obviously a newer person, Finn, the former rogue player, Janiro, a newer person, Guldborg, Hysterics, obviously from the LPL, Jamada, who did LCS, Law's obviously there, Medic is there again, Shocks is there, Treats is there, obviously former player, but they're working out. Troubling Catchy's on the whole split now, which is good news. Trimby's going to be there, who obviously didn't get picked up by a team and had the whole shenanigans with Fnatic, and then Vedius obviously still remains. So it's actually, if you look, like, first things first, while I'm still putting this up, is a lot of actual former players here, you notice. Like, they've got, like, what, 3 or 4 at least? They've got Brox, Finn.
Yeah, Brox has been on for a while, though, and Finn has also done appearances in the past.
Trimby, there's 4.
Treats has also done appearances in the past, yeah. So, I mean, they've got a good number of people who have done stuff before. Here, I'll put it on the screen now.
And obviously, by the way, it goes without saying, just before we get into who is and who isn't there, people who themselves chose not to be there, we can't flame Riot for not being on the broadcast. So first things first, remember, Cadril did say he's not doing the LEC anymore. So that's why Cadril isn't there. People don't know. Like, that's not some sort of like scandal or anything like that. He just chose not to do LEC anymore. Some of the other names we're going to get into, though, I think there are some quite conspicuous ones. And also, there are also some additions where it's like, who the fuck's that guy? There's a few like that for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to know some of the people who came up from the ERLs, for example. But I think, obviously, you know, Cadril not doing this is not surprising. That guy had like 150,000 concurrent viewers for co-streaming at Worlds. He's clearly in an exceptionally strong negotiating position with Riot. So if he doesn't want to cast,
by the way, you know, a fan made a point, and I realized this just shows how whenever you blindly support one person, you will just make ridiculous assumptions that aren't right. Like, you know, everyone got really mad, Monty, where when the final of Worlds was happening, Cadril got kicked out of the T1 offices. He couldn't do the streamer from there. But someone made a point, and it's so right, which is, remember, Cadril's brand was that he wanted the Shy and Weibo to win.
Yeah.
A fan made this point, and when they said it, I was like, dude, you're completely right. They said, imagine T1 just allowing you in their offices, if Weibo had won, to go mental celebrating Weibo winning over T1 with all the employees. That would, when they say it that way, I realize, wait, that's actually totally reasonable. You have to ask the person.
It's totally reasonable.
Yeah, this is totally reasonable, isn't it? Like, there's nothing bad about that at all. That's actually a fair play, T1. You get that. You win that one. You win that one.
Although,
imagine him. He would be doing it casting style, like a little rat running around. The Shy. So, some guys, like, his whole life was working for T1. Like, that would actually be mad PM, wouldn't it? I know.
So
that would be so insane.
So there are ways to. This is just an aside. I'm going to be streaming a lot of Bangers Only when the new season starts. So I'm going to be streaming a lot this year. And let's just say I've been thinking about production quality on my stream, and there are ways that you can use via a Wi-Fi network your phone as a camera. So if he had his phone hooked up to the Wi-Fi network, I'm just saying there would have been a way for him to uses OBS to change the stream to his phone camera and literally run around all of their offices laughing at people and like shouting about Weibo winning in their offices.
That would be amazing. I know. That would actually be amazing, wouldn't it? I know.
So there are some ways that you could do some pretty wacky shit. So I understand, like, you know, there could have been some stunts. Let's just put it.
Yes.
Let's put it this way: had it been Monty in that situation, I 1,000% would have done that. So I don't blame them.
Right.
You know, I think that was probably a good call.
By the way, I feel like what we should do is, before we get into who is on the list, the obvious thing is who is conspicuous, who isn't on there. So the obvious name, by the way, Monty, I'm a low key, like, sort of mildly bombed out that this person wasn't the whole story. As soon as this talent list was announced, I thought every comment below it and on Reddit would be, "Where's Quickshot?" You know, if people don't know, the LEC is Quickshot. Like, he has been the guy for like, what, 8 years or something, maybe 10 years. I don't know. Like, he was there almost the whole time, wasn't he?
The whole time. Yeah.
And if you think about it, right, at least I think it was only maybe halfway into that, maybe even less, that he actually took over. He's sort of been the guy guiding the broadcast and has made decisions on who gets to work the. Why aren't people asking, where is this guy? Because here's the problem. I don't like to do this personally. I don't like to do I have a secret, but I can't tell you. I hate that. I actually do. Despite spoiler, I do think that Slasher was full of shit by going, I know why Doc didn't sign, and then we never ever get to know. Like, no, of course, we just get blue forever on that.
It turned out he was also just wrong. Doc wasn't. What was it? It was like, Dr. Disrespect is done, and not just on Twitch. Meanwhile, just been streaming on YouTube for literally years now. No scandal.
But yeah, basically, the point is, there is actually a reason that isn't just like, oh, Quickshot chose to just chill out and take a split off or whatever. That's not the reason why. As far as I've heard, basically, it's like he's been removed from this broadcast. So we can't go into why that is at the moment. Maybe in a future episode when it's less edgy, we'll be able to tell you. But that's a big news right there, dude. Like I said, especially because to me, one thing I actually always appreciated about Quickshot, here's what's funny, Monty. I used to low-key be a little bit of a Quickshot hater when he was just the caster, basically. Because as a caster, some of his gimmicks aren't my style. Like, I'll give you a point here, right, Monty? I don't know the name of every fucking ultimate in the game. I'd rather you say he did his ult or pressed R. If you keep saying the ultimate, I don't always know that. So if people don't know, Quickshot's gimmick was he knew every ability, right? Sometimes I personally found that a bit annoying. So, okay. But once he became this, like, sort of big brother of the broadcast, I thought he's done a great job, mate. I think actually, if you look what he's stayed under his time, he's been mega. And I actually think in that role, as sort of like on-camera presence and being like a bigger brother, I think he does a great job of that. He's brought so many talent through, integrated them into the show. You've seen anytime there's a problem or you're at the big... But anyway, when they had that event where we finally got to have a proper LAN again, where we had the Malmo finals in 2022, Monty, as soon as he came out and he was doing the crowd work, you just remember, like, there's levels to this fucking game. Like, you can't just have some guy from NERL come out for a massive stadium and get the crowd. You need people who have, like, skills to do that. That's like this talent, there's on camera and on mic skills that this guy has. So I think this should be a big deal. Like, where is he? I hope he's back for spring split. This is just winter at the moment. Better be back for spring.
Yeah. You know, I think probably some people out there, we're not going to go into it, but there was some social media like bullshit that happened, you know, at the World Championship, which I suspect is the reason that this is occurring. I also suspect that because in the early stages of Worlds, when everything was in Ireland, he was part of the broadcast. And then when things moved to Korea, he was no longer part of the broadcast. I assume that has something to do with it. It's a really shitty situation because it's not even anything that he posted. And I'm sure you guys can discuss this on your own. Like, I think it's completely ridiculous. So I don't really want to get into the weeds about what it is. It's just absurd. So it is just baffling. And it sucks, man, because I think he's a great caster. And I've known Quickshot for a decade. And he is honestly like such a lovely human being. There is never any ulterior motives with him. He's just a really nice guy. And it's hard for me, knowing him like I do, to see him just kind of excluded from this because it's not really, it's not really.
I'll just say it, Monty. Where's the loyalty from Riot? Look at what this guy did for you all these years. What, you can't stand by him once over something relatively minor? Come on. Where's the loyalty?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's right in a nutshell, right? There never is any loyalty. This is why I find it baffling that people are loyal to them. Because what did Dash?
I can't tell you the reasons why yet, right? But put it this way, I recently had another scenario like this where someone behind the scenes has been completely fucked by Riot, and you know where the punchline always goes, Monty. At the end, I suggest a few different ways we could either, like, behind the scenes get back at them or publicly. And you know what their conclusion was? No, but I don't want to do or say anything on the off chance they'll still hire me. Like, this is the craziest thing about the Stockholm syndrome these people get into. Is it's like, as long as there is, like, literally, like, it's like the fucking, what's it called, the Dumb and Dumber meme of, like, see you saying there's a chance. There only has to be a 1 in a million chance these people ever again benefit from Riot, and they'll just stay silent. It's so weird, isn't it? So many people are just afraid to ever come out against them, mate. It's wild. It's the standard MO at this point in the industry, just not to ever say anything, just on the off chance that you need to work with them again.
Yep. So, I don't know, man. I think this is a really rough situation. I mean, there have been times when...
Right, obviously, the Dash one's the big example, right? Where basically, as far as we can tell, they just, like, quietly just kicked him out and then, like, didn't even, like, bring him back for the events that they implied they would.
Yep. I mean, they lied very publicly about how they were going to treat Dash, made content celebrating the fact that he was coming back, and then just never hired him really again. So... pretty ridiculous.
That's right. And there's another guy who just was his broadcast for, like, what, the better part of a decade. Notice the pattern here is they're not even loyal to their main guys, for fuck's sake. I get it when they sort of fuck over a low-key contractor, maybe even somebody who does other games, but these are your guys. Like, these guys have gone to the hilt for you for years. They carried your broadcast. They've been the face of your broadcast. Like, you got to have loyalty to someone, surely.
Yeah, and at this point in time with the turnover, I mean, we're looking at the talent right now. The only person who's been there as long as Quickshot is Shocks. That's it. Those are your two kind of, like, all-time pillars. And I don't think that either of them are bad at their jobs currently. They haven't fallen off. I find Quickshot delightful to listen to as a caster. And I think he had some really good synergy, particularly with Ender. Like, I loved the kind of, like, boomer zoomer sense of humor and dynamic that they really played up. I thought it was very effective because it worked very well at having somebody who's, like, a representative of the millennial audience and then somebody who's a representative of the Gen Z audience. And I thought it was a very fun rapport.
I mean, for the show, it had a logic as well, right, Monty? Because essentially what it was doing was, if you're the old school season 3 fan of League, that's your quick shot. And in this scenario, if you're the guy who just came along when it was LEC from, like, 2018 onwards, you're entering this analogy and everyone could understand the dynamic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, also, Ender also isn't on the broadcast because obviously he just announced he, like, retired to Valorant or whatever the fuck, didn't he?
Well, he already tried to do that one time. So
true.
He basically was like, I'd rather live in Los Angeles and I want to do Valorant, so I'm just going to do VCT. And then suddenly he was like, nah, I'm just coming back to Europe to do LEC for a while again. I think it was probably because there wasn't a lot of work in Valorant at the time. And now that this, VCT Americas is more stable, he probably got the deal that he wanted. And I think he legitimate.
Right. I think it was something like that. They had to save costs at the LEC headquarters, so they had to remove his entire walk-in closet that he had there. So he was like, well, I can't work under these conditions, If I'm expected to just show up in a suit and tie and talk about the game, I'm out of this shit.
I did enjoy that about him, though. Like, it was funny.
It was a gimmick. It was his gimmick, sure.
I still like your joke about him using all of Frost Curran's old outfits.
Yes. That's a good one too.
Which, honestly, I'd bet a lot of money that at least one piece of clothing he wore was bought for Frost Curran at one point in time.
Remember, by the way, that if people don't know, that's not even some sort of, like, a controversial joke. The joke is Frost Curran herself did dress in sort of an androgynous / male way, and he's doing it from the other side, and they were sort of meeting in the middle in a way. They were kind of weird away, of course. Yeah. That was the vibe, obviously.
Yeah, so, Ender not being there is kind of a bummer as well. I think, he's a good analyst, but it really does seem like he wants to be in the States, and his heart is more in Valorant these days. And the other person obviously missing is going to be Kadril. And Kadril never has to do League of Legends again if he doesn't want to. He's at a point where he can draw 10,000 concurrents as a variety streamer. I still think he'll do esports content and like co-streaming because it's huge for him and he gets bigger audiences. But on a long enough timeline, like I wouldn't be surprised if K-Trill just kind of retires into variety streaming. Because
I also get the sense, I don't know about you, Monty, but there's a thing that a lot of people don't know about League of Legends specifically that's different from the other esports games. So I've told you this story before. In Counter-Strike, if you go to an ESL event, so the biggest events in Counter-Strike, famously, Monty, right, they always say the day before the broadcast that you have a rehearsal, right? And we always go there at like 6 p.m. local time or whatever. And I can tell you, Monty, if I've attended off the top of my head, I don't know, 30 ESL events, there was an actual rehearsal one time out of 30. The other 29 times you went, had a little bit of sort of like conversation with the other talent, and then after like an hour they were like, you can just go, guys, we're not going to do it. Essentially the rehearsal ended up just being them setting the equipment up and they weren't ready to bring the talent on and test the mics, right? So the reason I bring this up, Monty, is that's a normal Counter-Strike event. Essentially at a Counter-Strike event, you turn up to the event and you just sort of do the day one, you're there. In leagues, like in League of Legends, like LEC, you don't even just do the broadcast days. You have like production meetings, you have to come in the office and discuss skates and fucking plan things out. Like if people don't know, K-Trill already is doing insane hours on his stream. He's obviously doing the LEC. That stuff wears on you eventually. Like, eventually that gets annoying. You don't want to do like extra days like that. And at the end of the day, I'm sorry, even though this wasn't the case for me personally, to some people, when they have done LEC finals, when they've done Worlds and they've done MSI, it sort of sits their appetite for doing it. Like, right, I've done it. I've done some World Championships. Cool. I am a bit weird. I would keep doing CS majors forever, mate. It's just my shit, 'cause I know it's going to be historical. But for some people, a few Worlds is enough. Maybe they don't want to do that forever in their career, So I don't blame him. I can sort of see why he did it. Not my choice, but I don't blame him at all. Fair play.
Yeah, and as somebody like, if you've kind of reached the end game of League of Legends casting, if you've like been on the world's final broadcast, I've talked to a lot of casters. I've been there. Like I didn't do the actual casting, but I was on the desk, and it just kind of loses its luster. You know what I mean? Because you more or less feel like, well, what is there now? You know what I mean? Like this is the top of the mountain. That's it. It doesn't go any higher than this. And you are then faced with the prospect of basically being in an eternal battle for 1-year contracts with Riot Games, who underpays you and treats you like shit, and job security. So what exactly is keeping you around if you have an out, right? There is no loyalty. Even if you do a good job, they'll just dash you at any point in time. So yeah, I don't really see.
What's great about that is Dash actually does work as an actual like pod as well. Obviously the name and you just dash them to oblivion, don't you? Just drop them completely on the rocks. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
So
this should be the new phrase. You've dashed them. There you go.
Yeah, you dashed them. That's so it. Like in this case, like you get mysteriously disappeared, like Quickshot has been. So I don't know, man. Like
one name for you, Monty. I'm actually surprised you didn't reference this. The obvious name I also think is conspicuous. Think of all the last years of the LEC. Think of the EU Masters and the NLC. Where the fuck is Nymera? Are we pretending this guy doesn't exist anymore? Like, as far as I know, by the way, I believe he's one of those people who lives in fucking Germany. I think he moved there.
He does. He lives in Berlin.
And if people don't know, like I just said, think about that. NLC, that's like a Riot broadcast, EU Masters, like this guy's come up through their system. By the way, as far as I know, never had a single scandal or anything controversial. In fact, I even believe, I don't really know him on a personal level, I just know him as a colleague. I even believe politically he's more sort of in the camp of all the shit that everyone's into in esports. Like, I don't know what's the dislike about the guy. Like, hasn't he just sort of done everything right? And he's not like the most beloved caster in the world, but he has his niche audience. I'd say he's shown his skill set, by the way, in multiple regions. Like, why are there people on this list I've never heard of? And by the way, players who've yet to even prove they're good on broadcast. But fucking Nymera can't be there. What's going on?
So it's possibly that he's working LPL, and a lot of the LPL announcements have been that people are getting cut from the broadcast. So I think they're really trying to run LPL with very, very few casters. And if that's the case, there might just be, remember that LPL runs 7 days a week. So, I mean, if they have, 4, 5, 6 casters for this, does he have time to do LEC? Would be a very reasonable question.
It would be a reasonable question, but I'll just say my guess would be they fucked him. But yeah, that's an interesting guess. Certainly, anything's possible, I guess. Right?
I mean,
That's Joe Rogan always defaults to on his show. He always goes, "I guess anything's possible," even after they've just said like some mad shit about like Bigfoot or something. You know, like, anything's possible, I guess. Right?
Yeah, and also, you know, Hysterics is on the LEC broadcast, probably not as a regular, but yeah, it is weird that Nymera was. I mean, it's not just that he was a guest on the LEC, but he kept getting picked up more and more and more and more and more by the LEC, and then suddenly he wasn't on the LEC at all. So I find it very strange.
Hasn't he done MSI and Worlds? I think he's done some matches at these tournaments, right? Like maybe Plains or something. Maybe. Has he ever done Worlds or anything?
I don't know. I don't recall off the top of my head. Possibly.
Maybe not. Could be wrong on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like I think Jamada already said that he's not doing LPL anymore, so it kind of makes sense that he would appear here on LEC. Dagda's obviously not on LPL at all anymore and is just doing entirely LEC. And then it's many of the people that we've seen before sprinkled in with some professional players. You know, it's nice that they're giving. I don't know who Aragon is, for example. You know, there are a couple people here that I don't know who they are. Aragon and Jiniro, I guess is how you say her name. I'm not familiar with, so we'll see how that goes.
I'm not familiar.
But yeah, I am a bit surprised that they wouldn't bring Nymera back for some of this.
Oh, right, you're right. Yeah, I said Jamada was LCS. It's LPL, sorry. I misspoke on that one.
Yeah, he was doing LPL.
Just I believe he is like American or something though, right?
No, I think he's British.
No, he's actually British. What am I talking about?
British.
Yeah, right. Never mind that.
Yeah. So yeah. I think the announcement generally makes sense. It is a bummer because, like, I think missing Cadril is going to be really hard because he was, in my opinion, like the best league caster of the last couple of years.
Oh, man, I think they're in real trouble. Like, if you look at that graphic that you put up, here's the obvious question I have, right? Which figure on this graphic, if they speak about, like, analysis and make a really strong point about the game, who has massive authority on this stream? It's almost no one, as far as I can tell, mate.
I mean, like, Vedius and Dagda.
I think Vedius isn't considered like a super expert by fans. I'd say they consider him more just a talent. Dagda's maybe all right. Like, if you look even at the players, like maybe if Trimmy makes a point, people might get, you know what I mean? That's to me, what Cadril fulfilled in the LEC's position was people did sort of almost worship this guy. He was considered like the ultimate like opinion or whatever. So I think the problem they're going to have for me is just like, these are all competent people of the ones I know, but I do think it's missing like a big name, if you know what I mean. Like, where's the really big name that I have to watch this broadcast? I've got to tune in to hear this guy. I don't think they've got it anymore, mate. These are just good talent. That's it.
Yeah, well, I think
as you said, the turnover is part of the problem. If these are people who'd all been there 8, 9 years, maybe then it would be like that. But it feels like every year this list changes, mate. In fact, the weird thing about EU is the joke is in League of Legends esports, it's actually LEC that's the melting pot, not the fucking United States of America. Like, why is LEC always the region that takes everyone in from everyone? You know this. Back in the day, there was even offers. Monty could have worked the EU LCS. Fucking Papa could have worked the EU LCS. Froskurin did eventually, but could also have. I think Atlas implied in my reflections he could have worked the EU LCS. It's the one region where everyone, and seemingly not only it could go, but they actually like, try to recruit the talent, right? So the reason I bring this up is, in light of the fact you can bring anyone who speaks English to the region in theory, like, this is an all right list, but it's not that crazy to me. I kind of feel like the turnovers sapped my spirit for a bit of the fucking talent. Like I say, like, that's why Quickshot not being there is a big deal to me. Quickshot and Cadril were like two of my main reasons to watch the talent. Neither are going to be there for this winter split now.
Yeah. It doesn't feel great. There's also no indication, at least yet, that LEC is the region that's been holding out in terms of co-streaming. So we may not even get like Cadril co-streams on the LEC. It might have to be like watch parties, which is what they've been doing because LEC doesn't, at least up until this point, has not allowed co-streaming, even though LCS cracked, allowed everybody to co-stream it the entire time, as opposed to just the super weeks in the playoffs like they did previously. LPL and LCK, you can co-stream the entire thing. It's just been LEC that has been completely blacked out in that way. Although I will say I would be surprised if they did not allow co-streaming this year. I would be surprised, especially Cadril. It seems really crazy that they wouldn't allow him to co-stream. So I don't know. Whole thing is a little weird.
I will say though, since I have mentioned it 1 million times, I'm glad actually finally Trouble just gets to do a whole split. For some reason, she was just in like that perma status of only being allowed to do a week every now and then. Well, I guess technically we don't know yet, but yeah, I hope this means she just does the whole split though, personally.
Yeah, she's been good. Yeah, I don't think everybody's going to be doing every week on this list. There's too many people. So like I imagine they'll cycle people in and out. And usually what they do is that they'll offer you like a minimum number of days. And then if they like you or you're doing well, then they'll be like, hey, want to come back next week or the week after? And they kind of like string you along in that way, from what people have told me. It's a ridiculous system, and it benefits Riot enormously because everybody is always dancing to the beat of their drum, and they never actually have to commit to anybody. And everyone at Riot is just totally cool with this situation. Like the producers think it's ethical or something that they can treat people like this. The people who run the esports department think, oh yeah, it's totally fine that you just work week to week, and if you don't get work anymore, well, I guess you're just fucked, and that's your problem, not ours. So I don't blame people for not wanting to do this. I mean, I said earlier, like a few weeks ago, that I think casting is the worst fucking job in esports right now because you have zero job security. And the end game is
also
fucking
worse, Monty. Here's why it's worse, because the difference with a normal job in theory is the second you stop doing that job, you don't have to like prepare for the job to start it again in 3 months. You have to live this game. If you're being a caster or an analyst, you basically have to live League of Legends. So if you don't get picked up, if you get picked up for 1 week in a split, you're hoping you get the whole split next. But what are you going to do? What, just basically work for like 8 weeks without pay, but watching all the games the same as you would anyway, and then hope you get, like, you can't have a life that way. Well, you can do it if you're like 19 years old or you fucking, sabbatical year or something, Monty, but like no adult with a family can live like that. Like this is just going to mean also you're never going to get like an amazing 35-year-old fucking that caster. Like they're all going to burn out eventually.
I mean, I've said this before, but why do you think that no LoL casters have kids? Why do you think that is, guys? Isn't it weird? Because by the way, I have 2 kids now, and all of the old LoL casters are literally within a year of me. Like if we talk about all like the original casters, people like Shox, Freak, Kobe, Quickshot, all these guys are the same age as me.
I mean, the joke I would make, and I mean it entirely in a friendly manner, is Kobe probably does have kids, just doesn't know about them. Jesus. That's actually a good one if you know him. If you know him, that's pretty funny joke, actually. It's all good. Just harmless joke, don't worry about it.
And a lot of these people are married, by the way. But right, I think, whether or not they're, it's been their decision, I think like it's indicative of the stability of the lifestyle that people haven't made this decision. I think it's indicative. Like it's hard when you realize that you are fighting every single year to get a contract renewed. And, frankly, the longer you're in this shit, like if you've been a league analyst for 10 years, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You've literally spent...
Monty, imagine the interview. You know the question they're going to ask. So what's this 10-year gap on your resume here? Imagine if it's like a finance job trying to explain that you were in esports, by the way. Like you were like an analyst for one video game. Like it's going to sound so shit, isn't it? It's going to sound so bad, Monty.
And also like, an org might be willing to pick you up because it's not like you don't have skills that are applicable. Even if you're just managing, a team manager, you move into, a GM position or something like that. You kind of like do the Papa Smithy move. Who's going to fucking hire you during esports winter? You're certain, like the teams are shutting down. Teams are going to merge. Teams are paying GMs shit money, right? There's no good escape route. So this is why I didn't blame Mark Z for taking that commissioner job. That's an incredible escape route for him. Sure. Like he absolutely should take that job. He absolutely should.
No, basically, you have to understand, Monty, in that moment, that was a lifeline thrown to him. And he turned to Travis Gafford and said, like, they need to find one of us in the rubble, brother. The fire rises. Then just like left. That scene out of The Dark Knight Rises was what Mark Z. Someone take that image and just put the text over and make that meme for me, please. Because that is what Mark Z did to Travis. He just left him and the crashing plane.
Yeah. And like a lot of these people are frankly, I'm not going to say too lazy, Thorin, because there was what Cadril did the last couple of years.
Oh, it's bonkers.
Bonkers. Okay. It was like, I can't imagine working 2 or 3 studio days a week, co-streaming for like 5 hours an Asian league before you go in to sit at the studio, cast games, and then turn on your stream when you go home and be out there every day. Like, it is nuts what he did. Like, he earned every bit of the success that he had.
I unironically think if you work gigs like that, it's why another reason I wanted to cut back on doing CS events. I actually think for real that probably takes years off your life. You're just redlining your system constantly. Like the worst moment ever for me, this is also, by the way, to allude to earlier on as to why I made that point that Dom doesn't do Best Damn League show. He's mad at me or anything like that. He's just cutting back on some of the stuff he's doing because they've been doing too much over the years. Like, all you need to know about how broken it is to be a core streamer, as in a bad sense, is I remember once telling Dom, like, well, how are we going to schedule like when we do the Best Damn League show, because it's a European show, we want it to be live European hours, and he was just sort of like, it doesn't matter anyway, I just have to get up on my alarm anyway for the LPL, so just schedule it whenever. It's like, what, bro? Like, because normally if someone's in like a West Coast on LA, like I'm like, better be at like 1 p.m. your time, 10 p.m. He could just do it whenever, because his job basically was go to sleep, just make yourself like a soldier. I must now go to sleep. It doesn't matter about my circadian rhythm. I must now go to sleep. And then I wake up by an alarm in like 4.5 hours to start going, right, here we are, guys. IG against Thorin, OMG. And then you have to get into that, like, man, this must have been so draining to that job. I can't even imagine it.
Yeah. I mean, the reward is obviously millions of dollars, so you can only complain so much. Sure. You know what I mean? Yes. Like, we're not going to shed a tear for LS or Dom or Cadril as they're set up for the rest of their lives. You know, but it is very difficult. It is very difficult work. So my point, though, is, Thorin, is like, I'm not saying that I'm not going to go out and call other casters lazy for doing a normal human amount of work. But the fact of the matter is that it's just like being a pro player. If somebody is going to do twice the amount of work that you are in terms of practicing, like, that's just going to fucking show. And if you spend, it is, I think, frankly, embarrassing for some of these LCS and LEC casters to have literally nothing that they own from the last 10 years. We talked earlier in this show, Summoning Insight's going on its 10-year anniversary in February. We've been doing this the whole time. Nobody asked me to do this. We just did it, even when I was casting League of Legends.
If we make a report, if we did one just about Summoning Insight for companies like sponsors, if we showed them how many like subscribers came to the channel, how many overall viewed hours over 10 years, how many total hits the video, those numbers are mega impressive if you take those to a sponsor. Like, the joke is every single big name, you know, I won't say them because it'll be calling them out, but think of all the big names on LEC and LCS. Most of them, by the way, started at least 5-6 years ago, if not 10 years ago. They could have insane media networks, the whole brand.
Look how fast Cadril did it.
Shit. Yeah.
Look how fast Cadril did it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, he did it, and obviously his personality helped with that, his status as a former pro player. Like, he was built to do this. He has a very unique mixture of charisma, game knowledge, and work ethic. Like, those three things coming together are very good for Cadril. And he's really maximized that advantage that he's had, and good for him. But the personal cost is enormous. You know, the hilarious thing is, like, you can be a millionaire from these streamings, but where are you spending this money? Like, it's actually impossible to enjoy the money that you have because you're just going to, like, turn on your PC and just do it all over again. Like, I guess he probably, like, had a nice hotel while he was in Korea, but he was streaming the whole time. Like, you don't really get to enjoy the fruits of your labor until after your streaming career is done. I mean, look at XQC. Guy gets $100 million contract, and, like, what is he doing with it? Like, buying stupid watches? That's about it. Like, there's no real way to have a good time with this money if you're constantly chained to your computer in order to continue the grind. Right?
Oh, no, the joke is, and you know this, one of the things that people who work a normal job don't understand is that once you get to a certain level of status, the dynamic reverses. So when you're poor, you are willing to sell all of your time in exchange for money. When you actually get wealthy and have status, you exchange some of the money for more of your time. Yes. That's why eventually super duper billionaire guys don't work all day long. You know, they're like in the office certain hours, and then the rest of the time you have someone delegated, don't you? So, like, I agree. Once you get to that level, it's why if you notice, if you ever listen to the meta conversation from LS and Dom every year about their stream, and Cadril, it's always this discussion of like, how many more years can I do this? Like, how do I transition? How do I do some? By the way, if people don't know, I've told this story many times before. The reason Crackdown, the original show I did with Dom, existed is because Dom actually found it like it gets a bit monotonous just streaming the game all the time. So a talk show, one, I'm doing half the heavy lifting, and then two, it's fresh, it's something different, it's revitalizing, and it's like a little break within your big streaming schedule. So I actually think, yeah, you can see the smart people like the Doms and the Cadrils who've started to shape it that way. Some of the others, though, I think are going to. Here's the thing, Monty, they won't know it now. It'll be in like 3 or 4 years that they'll really regret they didn't do it. I mean, the Dash example's an obvious one because he's in obscurity now. No one remembers him, whereas he was like, for real, one of the absolute biggest when he was on the broadcast. He'd be top 5 or something, wouldn't he?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, Dash, it was kind of a cruel twist of fate that this happened like right at the start of esports winter. So he didn't, with the Overwatch League dying and he didn't have another place to really go. Because all of the kind of consistent gigs were more or less controlled by other people at that point in time, right? Like he wasn't going to break into VCT because they already have hosts, right? It's hard to, and there's not any new big esports.
A few years earlier, anyway. By the way, there's a detail I'll drop for you. Here's a little gem I heard from some very good sources. I heard that. Are you ready? This is where, like my joke earlier, Monty, that no entity simultaneously gives people as much money, but also denies other people making money in the industry. Are you ready for the ultimate punchline of all about Riot Games? I've heard in general, Monty, Riot Games don't want to cross the streams and have people from League be on the Valorant broadcast. They want you to sort of do one game or the other. They don't want you to do both. So that's brilliant, guys. Now you're the loyal talent who's worked for Riot all these years, done the job, never spoken out about any of the scandals, never spoken about any of the dodgy sponsors, never spoken about China, and you've worked all these years either on the League broadcast, but you can't go on the other one now. Why? Arbitrary reasons, for the same reason we can't have double limit worlds. Like, what is this? Like, they're like one of the most disloyal companies I've ever seen, Monty. Because the weirdest thing is, normally, like, think about like a mafia boss. Yeah, you fuck over the person who's disloyal to you, but the guy who's loyal to you, you have to show loyalty in reverse. Like, you have to reciprocate. That's the weird thing. Riot never reciprocates, but then also people act as if they did. They always still hold a candle for them till the end of time, don't they? It's so weird. I don't get it, because here's the thing about me, Monty. It's not that I'm like some super warrior who'll always battle injustice. It's just, I'll give you an example. You know this from doing Muay Thai, Monty. You know, one of the things you have to train yourself when you do sparring is you can't like focus on the fact that you just got hit, because then you won't react, right? You have to almost make it like when someone hits you, you still get your shot off anyway, right? That's just who I am. If someone hits me, I just hit back. It's my output. I can't believe though that, like, my analogy is Riot's like trained like everyone starts as a wolf as talent. And they just, eventually it's just dogs in the Riot ecosystem. They're all just domesticated. They'll never bite the owner. You can do anything you want to. Like a dog, by the way, they have no memory of what they just forgive you instantly. They come back the next day. It's so sad. Why are you all little lapdogs for fucking Riot, guys? It's just sad.
The wackest one to me is like DDK, because we did that 4 Horsemen about the Sean Gare's like DDK shenanigans that Riot pulled, where they were like the most popular casting duo in the early days of Valorant, and then Riot like didn't hire them for VCT Americas, and then I think DDK was recently tweeting like, "Oh, didn't get hired to do VCT Americas now that he's no longer working for 100 Thieves." He tried to go back after they just fucked him. Like it's insane to me.
What a world. What a world. This also, by the way, shows me low key. I've just realized something, Monty. You know, I made that like Thorin's Law, where it's like, subtract 5 from the age of any pro player. Why did I put pro player? Just anyone in esports. Because the joke is like, some of these people we're talking about, by the way, are like 32 years old. But from the way they act, so naive and doe-eyed and innocent in the world, like, what? I will get screwed over. You'd think they were like a 16-year-old like intern just starting in the industry. Like, guys, you've also got to toughen up a bit. Like, the reason why I'm also sort of prepared for these battles is I've done smaller battles in my life against people who were fucking me over, etc. Like, I didn't just go straight for the final boss. You got to do it like, think about it, boys. You know those shit Dark Souls games you all love? You just do all the side quests first, don't you, till you get all powerful. Then you go and fight the boss. So basically, that's what we're talking about. The side quest is make your own YouTube channel, make a talk show, have some unique branding, and then eventually you'll be powered up enough. Like I said about earlier with the Saudis, if you become Cadril, you might actually be able to battle LEC and get what you want. But if you just a low-level guy in this scenario, the Nightmare example, you are going to be tossed to and fro on the seas of Riot. You have no choice.
Yeah. It's a rough situation, and I think that people really need to take it seriously, because even just a couple hours out of your week to produce your own content over a long enough timeline is going to snowball into something greater, right? Take for example, just for us.
By the way, I'll tell you an angle people don't even get. And I tried to explain this to some of the more recent people I've done shows with who were doing their first show, Monty. I told them one of the most underrated benefits of doing talk shows is I won't say who the co-hosts were, but certain smaller co-hosts, Monty, I told them every time I bring in a guest that I've booked, because I'm a big figure in esports, add them on fucking Discord when I put them in the group chat. Now you have contact to that person. If you now want to do an interview with that person, or you now have that, like literally just to expand your circle out, by the way. When you do content interviews, it'll form bonds with those people. Now they know you. Like the actual knock-on effects are way bigger than people realize. It's not just, by the way, this is the stupidest thing. I think the main reason they don't do it, Monty, is because the raw ad revenue from a YouTube video isn't that much. So they go, this isn't worth my time. The benefits to your career, the joke is, I would do it for free for some of the benefits, mate. Like it expands out your whole network and makes you a big figure and your brand and everything. It's worth it. It's really worth it if you do it. Even if you're on a small scale, you don't have to be us. You could just do a small podcast and it'll build up your network of people. You'll get other casters on and other smaller players. The net effects are almost universally positive for me.
Yeah, and you never know what's going to happen in the future. When we started Summoning Insight, we knew that it was a podcast, but we had a problem where people only watched the video. And even though our metrics of like audience retention and average view time were enormous by YouTube standards, so people were treating this show like a podcast, because it was weird in 2015 for people to watch their podcast on YouTube. We couldn't actually break into podcast advertising. It took Joe Rogan having YouTube viewership for the podcast companies to realize, the podcast advertisers to realize, wait, this is a podcast, even if it has video. Now we're on video on Spotify, you know what I mean? And so now we can access those revenues. But we didn't actually start this show. And for the majority of this show's existence, we could not access the same revenue streams that other podcasters could that we can now, which is great for us now. But my point is, you never know what's going to come down and what's going to be monetizable in the future. So building up something that has an audience always is going to have some level of value to it. It's very important. And I feel like a lot of the talent has just kind of let that slip away. And never kind of put forth the additional effort in order to build something that they themselves owned.
By the way, I've said this 100 times, but sometimes I learned this myself. There is like a saying that sometimes you yourself have to hear something 100 times before it sort of clicks and means something to you. So I'll say it again anyway, which is when I say all these things about how to navigate being a talent and how to have content, but play with the TOs, I don't mean do it the way I did. I would never recommend people do it the way I did, because I always say the joke is I barely got away with it and I am me. So if you're not me, I'm just saying like for example, when I say to battle against Riot, I don't mean to come out and publicly diss them and say they're shit and corrupt. Yeah, then they never will work with you again. But they don't have, it's not binary. There's not like go full balls deep or nothing at all. You can choose levels of gradation. Like if you actually notice, by the way, some of the figures we have talked about do push back a little bit. They're just more careful with it or more political in how they phrase it, or they just couch it in euphemisms. Or, I want to take it a bit easier and not work as many sort of broadcast. No, they have ways of saying it. So you don't, it's not like you have to be an iconoclast to do this. You can still just be a figure within the industry who's well liked and it's not causing any, you're not rocking the boat. But there's just certain times when you have to sort of fight for your own, you have to fight in your own corner, as it were. And you can't, and there's certain lines you can't let them cross, in my opinion.
Yeah. And also, just if you are, this is just good advice about anything, but if you're confident in the product you're putting out and you just need to grind it, you just need to grind it out a lot of the time. Like an example for us is we're starting, we start the LFN Sports channel, we start the LFN Culture channel, right? These podcasts, like Foreplay that I do with Thorin, maybe it has like 10,000 downloads per episode, which is not a lot by our standards compared to our esports content. And, it's not going to generate very much money, even if we had advertisers on that show. But the point is that we're really confident in the quality of that show. And we just know that on a long enough timeline, if you continue to grind it out, if you just grind and grind and grind and grind and grind, and you don't fucking quit, the rewards for that show are going to be huge because the potential audience for that show is much bigger than esports. But it's hard because we are not known film commentators.
Yes.
Thorin's not an NBA commentator, even though he spent years and years and years analyzing the NBA. You just have to do the work, and eventually, the dam will break if you keep pushing hard enough. And so, I mean, at least because it's me, Richard, and Thorin, I'm not particularly discouraged. First off, because I remind myself how many people would kill for a 10,000 download an episode podcast.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not big for us, but it's still good. It puts us in like the top 0.5% of podcasts, or 0.1% maybe of podcasts. So we're already like at a pretty high threshold. And then it only takes like, word of mouth over the years for things to like multiply, or to have that one episode that really pops off, right? And it can be totally random when that happens, and you just never know. So yeah, watch the podcast. It's good, guys. But watch the sports channel, watch the culture channel. We've got other stuff that might interest you, and we're going to continue to push in those directions. And, at least the culture channel has been our fastest growing channel in terms of subscribers this last year. So even if we're not there in terms of the total number of views or total number of subs, it's growing faster than the other channels. So point is, there's a lot to like, and you can always do more work, especially if you put it in. The people who win eventually are the people who are willing often to put the most time in and just not give up. That sounded like an answer to one of our subscriber questions, which we can get to now, by the way, because there's some, shenanigans happening in the LCK with the role tournament, which is fun. But here's the thing that's going on, Thorin. We still don't have the patch that this professional game is going to be played on hold on, let me check here. On Saturday.
Oh, the patch notes for that matter, right?
On Saturday.
The patch notes out either, right?
The patch comes out on Wednesday the 10th. So when you see this, the patch might already be out. But it is psychotic, guys, that LEC is going to play. And yes, I know the players have been able to play on like Tournament Realm with the patch, et cetera, et cetera. But they haven't been able to like solo queue with this.
Solo queue it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, what the hell, man? We're starting a professional scene. They've been scrimming on it, but scrims are weird, and you're only going to see a few things. And it's like teams are going to have very strange and unique takes on the meta. It's going to be interesting for us as fans, but also it's one of those things where, like in LEC, if one team who's kind of bad just suddenly has a very good read, they could absolutely dominate Winter despite being a garbage team, just because they got the meta read right. We see this at Worlds sometimes.
What you're saying is this is the chance for KT to dominate in spring.
No, I don't want KT to win. I refuse to like KT this year. I will not like
listen, they're not going to win the long run, but I hope, like you're saying, that somehow Lord Beryl just intuits the meta, and for the first 4 weeks they're just a dominant force. Because here's the sad thing, something that might actually piss you off low-key. Even when I did my interview that I just released with Trimby, he even continually references things Beryl did, and it's like, I wanted to just pause the interview, like, wait a minute, intervention, like, what are you guys seeing that? What are we not seeing? Like, what? Why do you actually low-key? I think the support players think he's really good. Like, I've got to find out why. It won't be something for this show, but I'll put a pin in that and I will go and investigate, because there must be something going on that I don't get about that man, because I don't get it. He's a meme to me. He just is a meme. I'm trying. It's like when the Rogue players told me Malran was good. It's like, look, I'll take your word for it, but I don't really believe you. If you know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. I think you're sort of like, it's Cope. I don't really believe that he's actually good. Is he though? I don't know.
And look, you guys might be really excited about the inevitable clown fiesta that is going to happen, but I mean, there are some really outrageous things that are going on right now. So, for example, if I go to lolesports.com, by the way, there are no matches scheduled for the LEC, which is starting in 4 days as of the recording of this podcast. Like,
which is amazing, because you can actually already bet on the games. So the idea, like, they aren't even on the official website of LOL Esports, is like, that is insane, mate. That is mental.
I'm looking at it right now. There are no LEC matches for the 13th. And yes, it's on Leaguepedia and it's on the third-party wikis, but it's fucking bonkers
No, it shows when I do it. When I show it,
they must have just put them up. They must have just put them up.
Oh, right.
I
Maybe it
checked
went
it
up
earlier
today.
It must have gone up earlier today.
Right.
But I mean, the fact that it couldn't even be done a full week beforehand
ridiculous.
is ridiculous.
Yeah. We're only like 4 days out, something like that. So yeah.
And by the way, LCS, from what we can tell, appears to be doing the same format that we saw previously, just based on the matches as they've been scheduled. So they have released those. It looks like,
we've missed something before we do the viewer questions. There was a detail one. Do you remember they changed the slots for Worlds?
Yes. Yeah, we do have to talk about that. I was going to bring it up as well. So LCS looks like it's going to be the same format, just because it looks like they've gone from 5 matches a day to 4 matches a day, at least from the schedule they've released. So all hope of LCS escaping the garbage double round robin format is gone. Maybe they'll do something interesting or more interesting for playoffs. Mark Z has said that there's going to be a big announcement, which of course we will miss for this show. So we'll have to talk about it next week instead. So apparently in the morning. So probably before the show even gets released.
Like the numbers. You know, the thing me and Richard have said about by the numbers back in the day, we just noticed eventually the pattern became people released the big news the day after by the numbers every week. Because it's like, they know that, like, it's like, you know, the famous thing in business where you do something at like 4:45 p.m. on Friday because everyone goes for the weekend. Like, that's what people almost do at this point. By the way, it works. I can't lie. The meta does work. It works.
But yeah, it's absurd that, you know, we don't have any official announcements about LCS yet. It's extra absurd that we have a patch that's coming in mere days before. Like, and it's not just a patch, Thorin. It's the massive patch that they are doing with all of the new itemization, with all of the new, map changes that they're doing. This is the biggest change that we've probably seen in 3 years to this game.
Yes.
And I guess we have some challenger
and
remember,
Monty,
games
at the end of this winter split, any player who's like in the 9th place team, we're all going to say he failed at his job, is bad, and should be replaced. Like, even though we're all going to forget this shit about this patch on like week 1, for example, it's actually bad, isn't it? It is bad how we treat these players.
I mean,
like you said, Monty, they can only scrim on this. They can't even solo queue on this patch. Like, they actually can't practice their job individually.
Right, and you're always a prisoner of the teams you scrim, and it takes, as you guys know from Worlds and international competition, it takes time for like the meta innovations to kind of, it transmits like a virus, right? It goes from this team has the original virus, and then in scrims they transmit it to this other team, and then that team transmits it to the other team. So if you're at the end of the chain, you get the virus last, and you can get completely fucked by this, right? Because it's in this scenario, the virus is a good thing to have, right? So if you're what's perceived as a lower level team, and you're not scrimming G2, then it might take you some time to get G2 innovations to you. And you could just get absolutely dumpstered. Or alternatively, there could be a minor team that has a good analyst or a player who has a specialty in a certain champion, and you start dumpstering everybody, and G2 has no idea, and then G2 just gets upset by it, right? Like, there's a bunch of really fucking whack-ass scenarios that can happen. And if you think it's bad at international events, it's going to be giga bad at the start of this. Again, this is good. Part of me loves it, Thorin, because we're going to, on the show next week, we're going to have some wild shit to talk about. Like, there's going to be a lot of theories about what the best way to play the game is. We're going to go deep on the LEC stuff. It could be really fun, but it's objectively bad for competitive integrity. It's objectively bad. So, do you want to talk about the world seeding? Because that is an interesting new tidbit that Riot's brought up.
So if people didn't know, what they did basically is they've gone back so that now if you're in the 4 big regions, LEC, LCS, LCK, and LPL, everyone starts just with 3 seeds again. We've gone back to that. But then PCS and VCS get 2 slots each. And then basically the key thing is this. The winning team at MSI gets a guaranteed spot at Worlds, but they must also make the playoffs of the summer split of their region. So if they don't do that, I think that's like what stops them being like a shit team who's just only good in spring, basically. And then also it says that the next best performing region at MSI, so after the winners, the next best performing region gets an additional seed. But then, oh no, it's the seed. Maybe it's that team that has to make the summer split. That's it. Yeah, the winner of MSI goes to Worlds, but then the next best team from the region wise gets a slot, but they must make this playoffs. That they can't like bomb summer and they still get to Worlds. So essentially, the key thing to point out is this. Initially, I was scared when I saw this, Monty, because when I saw about the 3 slots, my first thought was, well, yeah, you just had Worlds where one Western team, as has been the case for the last 2 Worlds, made playoffs, and it was by that much. So like, you don't want to have Worlds where it's only 8 Asian teams in the playoffs. So I thought this is a cynical way to do that. But if you actually look at the way it's applied, it probably still will be the LPL and the LCK that'll get their 4th seed via this method. So I think in the end, it'll actually sort of work out, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be hype if another region gets it, right?
Imagine if LEC beat like LPL and stole MSI again. That would be massive, wouldn't it? Yeah, of course.
So I think there's some hype to it. We do have to discuss what this does, because it could have pretty big implications for format for Worlds. And what I mean by that is that basically they're saying that there's only going to be 20 teams at Worlds now instead of 22. Yep. And I'm not sure how to read that. It could mean a million different things in terms of play-in formats. Like, I imagine just due to the reception that idiots gave them about the Swiss system, and just, frankly, just because Swiss was better than the previous group stage format. Oh, so they're all going to, have a circle jerk inside of Riot and pretend that it's the best format possible. So I can't imagine that they're going to change Swiss. So I think probably what this is going to affect is play-ins mostly. And I am going to be sad that we're not going to get the 4th NA versus 4th EU match that we got this past year. The winner of that.
Well, that was a cool concept, wasn't it?
Golden Guardians and BDS.
Good, but it could have been awesome. Yeah, it could have been great.
But the hype that went into that was really fun, I thought. And I liked it as a Westerner because it guaranteed an NA versus EU match to kick off Worlds. Like a best of 5. That was a fun way to start Worlds. And play-ins was objectively much better this year than it has been in previous years. Oh. I thought that part of the Worlds, even though obviously I would like play-ins not to exist at all if I had to, but if I have to watch play-ins, this was a good way to do it.
No, I agree.
So actually less play-ins is a bit interesting, or, maybe they are. One can hope that they're going to tinker with the Swiss format, but I think that's probably just going to get run back the same way it was.
Oh, I'll almost guarantee it'll just be the same if I had to guess.
Yeah, and I don't think, we're going to get double elimination or anything like that either. I mean, obviously I would even argue, no joke, T1 winning in single elim, which is probably the best storyline possible for like Riot overall, probably ensures we don't get that low bracket bait, because you don't want to fucking rock the boat. Like, you're not going to get a storyline like that or DRX winning if you make double elim, probably. Yeah. I mean, T1, I think, probably could have won. I would be shocked.
But it's not as certain, though. If you have to run that back, who knows?
I would be shocked if DRX won.
The joke is DRX barely won any series in that whole fucking playoffs, did they? So, I think they wouldn't even do it. The joke is, mate, with a double elim bracket, look, logically, if they ran through the same upper bracket, they could only come top 3 at worst. But I think they'd come 3rd. I think they'd lose in their fucking. Well, I guess they'd come. They'd have to make the final. I guess they'd have to come 2nd in this scenario. But there are so many teams I think would have beaten them in that fucking bracket, especially with a rematch.
Yeah,
with a rematch, come on.
Yeah. So, Riot, I'd be shocked, but I will hold out a small amount of hope that they are trying to cut broadcast days from play-ins to finance double elimination. That's the hope I will. Right? Okay. That's my cope, Thorin. Okay. My cope is Riot is changing it to 20 teams to have fewer broadcast hours on play-ins so that they can provide budget for double elim.
I just don't buy it. Oh, the other angle as well, because I saw some people going a bit mad about this, is that the whole thing about, I can't remember, was it the MSI one or Worlds? One of them is going to be in a smaller studio for the groups. I think it was Worlds group stage.
Oh, it's Worlds, yeah.
It won't be in a stadium. Now, I will say, this is an area where it's going to surprise people, but I won't be as critical as I normally would be, which is, because I come from Counter-Strike, it's actually default in Counter-Strike that it's only when you get to the top 8, the playoffs, that it's in front of the stadium. We actually have our group stage games in a tournament area, so I will say that's not weird compared to Counter-Strike, for example. So I'd just say it just historically, obviously they had all the games in front of a big crowd. I think that's the problem, is people's expectations of what was done in the past in League. But again, if I have to think about cost-cutting measures, Monty, this is one of the most obvious ones, and just don't have it in a massive... Stadium days cost a lot of money if people don't know.
Yeah, it's not just that. It's like you have to pay for the venue, and then you have to, kit it out, because obviously you have to move all your infrastructure over there. You have to build out the stage. And yes, they are doing massive renovations. So if you don't watch LCS, you may not be aware, but as part of VCT, they changed the LCS studio. So it would be less LCS branded with like more LEDs, so they could switch it between Valorant and LCS. So that I think they're basically doing the same thing in LEC, and they have said they're adding more seats, but I think it's like a few dozen more seats. It's not enough to make it a substantially different experience. And yeah, they're running all of play-ins and all of groups out of the LEC studio, which will probably have 250, 300 person capacity, which is not great, clearly. But what are you going to do? Like they ran a lot of worlds out of LoL Park in Korea. It's a great way to save money, and
yeah,
you need to save money. So this needs to be profitable. And frankly, I will say something.
Remember this, Monty. Here's the problem. People are just thinking of the really big game that they would want to watch on like a stadium, right? So obviously, think about the Swiss system. When like fucking T1 plays Gen G, obviously you'd like to watch that in a stadium. Would anyone like to go to a stadium to watch Team Liquid against GAM? Because that was in the same format. That's my point. It's like there are certain games it's not even worth putting on, is it? Like, come on, fucking BDS against, I don't know, who gives a shit? Who cares?
Also, at least in Korea, there were a lot of matches that didn't really have a lot of fans at them when they had them in the bigger venues this last year. I mean, you saw a lot of empty crowd shots in Korea.
Yep.
And I think it's smart to kind of go with a venue that you can fill up. And here's a hot take that nobody's...
An angle, Monty. Here's an angle, though, where it might cause problems. It's specifically Koreans, mate. Here's what I know was going to cause the problem. What happens when Worlds is going on and T1 fans find out their whole fan club can't go to the group stage game? Ooh, I want to see trucks for Riot, not fucking T1, Riot games. Trucks outside the venue, LEDs. You know how to do it, Korea. You're the best at it. Roll it back. Because those fans will go nuts if you don't let them in.
Yeah. And it's also that a lot of the venues, there are fewer venues this time too. Sometimes we've seen different stages for quarterfinals, semifinals. Like sometimes there's been a different venue for play-ins, groups, quarters, semis, and finals. This time,
by the way, go on, keep going.
This time, guys, we're getting only Paris and London, and Paris is in the Adidas Arena. It has like a 6,000 to 8,000 capacity, and that's going to be quarters and semis. And then they're going to the O2 Arena, which is low key a very cool venue for them to have a World Finals in. Like, really great venue.
But it's kind of whack to have that few people for like quarters, though. What if quarters is like an enormous game? What the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think
here's the joke. The joke is because it's in France, Monty. Suddenly, someone runs into the venue. We're there in this hypothetical scenario, and someone goes, "Thorin, you're not going to believe this, but the problem is the T1 fans are outside and they're really angry, and then it's really dangerous." But I saw coming around the corner was the Carmine Corp fans, and then oh my god, they're fighting outside. That'll be the ultimate me, just like let them fight. I'll just stand inside the window watching. This is fucking amazing, buddy. Look at that shit. Holy shit, just kicked that guy's head right off. Like, I'll just be fucking watching, boys. Y'all can just do it yourselves. There is another detail, though, which is there was one last thing they snuck into this press release. By the way, Monty, I'll tell you this right now. This isn't an article. You don't do an article, the state of game. These are like all separate news posts, mate. Like seeds are changing, venues changing, and then they slipped this last one in there. How is this not its own news post? That they're going to do their own, essentially like Hall of Fame. They're going to do a Hall of Legends for League of Legends, right? Or if there's anyone I don't trust to make a Hall of Fame about their own esport, it's easily Riot Games. They would be number one on the list. Like this, there's no way this is going to be done properly. It's going to be like, first ballot, double lift. Like, you know what I mean? It's going to be ridiculous and coarse and all. Meanwhile, like the joke is like Mad Life will be waiting like 10 years to get inducted. You know what I mean? Like,
I just can't wait, Thorin, for Bjergsen and Double Lift to be introduced to this, in spite of the fact that, look, You could make an argument that Doublelift was like a top 380 carry in the world in 2011,
2012.
2012. Okay.
Yeah.
So like, I'm kind of with you, sort of a little bit on that one. There was never a point in time where Bjergsen during his career was a top 10 mid laner in the world.
No. I mean, I know fans will say he was, but that's because you don't know how deep like China and Korea were, guys. Come on, there's no way he was.
You just wait until Dyrus gets in, because everybody cried when he retired. Like, I mean, this can't be real. Also, they don't announce any details. Like, are they just going to induct Faker first, even though he's still playing? Normally, you would wait till somebody retires.
Yeah, that is the nightmare. Obviously, if people don't know, that already causes normal Hall of Fame's problems. Is unless you're recruiting people from the 2000s, most people are still active in some context. They're a coach or a commentator or something. So I know I agree on that one. But my question to you, since you invoked the name, mate, you mentioned it. What do you think of all the fucking just cavalcade of comedy errors that League of Legends and TSM has been, to find out in 2024 that Dyrus just didn't get any salary? It's like, the one thing, Monty, they gaslit us on for 10 years was that the org takes care of the players really well and just gives you, like, you know, amenities, money. Yeah, no shit, because the joke is they're giving Dyrus complimentary donuts because they don't pay him his fucking salary. Like, what are we doing here? Dyrus, with that money, you can just buy all the stuff you want, mate. What are we doing? What are we doing here?
I will say he definitely got paid money when Riot started doing the team stipends in LCS. He would have been at least making 25K.
No, Monty. I actually DM'd him about exactly that topic and said, you are just forgetting about the stipend. And he essentially told me, like, I just never paid attention to that. So here's the problem. I will say this, Monty. It's possible Dyrus just didn't notice and just didn't, you know, like, he was making a lot from streaming. Maybe he didn't see that like 25K was part of the payment.
Right.
But it's also plausible based on what he said. Maybe they didn't pay him. I mean, the problem with that is this, Monty. I said this on Side Select. As far as I know, with what that money was assigned for, it would essentially be some sort of fraud / potentially theft if TSM did keep that money.
Yes.
So I would hope it's just that Dyrus was silly and didn't keep track, just didn't bother asking, and they just paid him in his account or something. I hope that's the case. Because as you say, people forget in the early years, the stipend was the main salary for some teams.
Yeah, it would be very surprising.
And obviously, by the way, you can speak to this. Obviously, when you were in Renegades, they used to send you the stipend to send to the players, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was included in their contract. We obviously paid them more than the league minimum, so we got that money, but they made more money than the minimum of the stipend. So it was kind of a pass through. But yes, that absolutely did happen. I mean, hilariously, part of one of the reasons why they banned me was because they said there was some sort of like financial tomfoolery, because they sent my stipend check to Team Impulse, and so I didn't get it, so I couldn't pay my players on time, and then when I got it, I paid my players. You know what I mean? So they then used that as some sort of evidence that I was doing illegal trades with TDK. And then when I pointed out to them that they didn't send me the money, they sent it to the wrong fucking address. Like, anyway, whatever. I can't handle Riot. So in any case, like, I think that is crazy. And honestly, in the Dyrus case, what's even more perplexing is the fan reaction, because what I saw from fans, Thorin, was people saying,
all defending like, TSM and everything. Yeah, exactly.
What they were saying, like, oh, well, at least he got 100% of his stream revenue, as if it's normal for orgs to take a percentage of their professional players' streams. That's not normal, guys. As far as I never took a percentage of any of my players' streams. I don't know orgs that did that. Do you know of any orgs that did that?
No. I mean, I'm at this point on Side Select. The fact, the weird way they're framing that, Monty, is they're making it sound like TSM are the one who generates the money, and then they're just doing Dyrus a favor, letting him on. It's like, no, Dyrus was one of the biggest streamers in the world, and TSM was getting to benefit from all their sponsors being on his stream and the fucking crazy CPM that they all made. Like, no, the joke in that scenario is it doesn't make any sense that they would be taking some of his fucking streamer. Same as the other one they said as well. Look, I understand when he was in Epic Gamer, maybe it's cool they let him live in the house. But after that, people were also going, yeah, but Monty, he did have like paid accommodations at Everyone does. That was everyone in League of Legends.
normal.
What a weird thing to think is like part of your payment. That was literally the default situation for every player in a team house. Like everyone was in a team house back then. That's not counted as like a perk. In fact, the joke is back then it was potentially a negative. You have to live away from home in a fucking team house with like 4 other players, like some nightmare solo queue blunt rotation, and just fucking spend all day with your teammate. Imagine having to spend all day with your jungler if you're a top player. Like, mate, I can barely handle living 20 minutes with this motherfucker. I have to like see him get the fridge as well after this guy griefed me. Like that's a fucking downside of your job, not a perk. That's not good.
Yeah. So I don't know. Certainly there were, I'm not going to say that there weren't benefits to your popularity from being on TSM and being part of that environment. Because I mean, clearly, like, we can say that people like Dyrus and the Odd One would not have had as big of streams if they weren't on TSM. So the TSM brand did have value and, you know, certainly, you know, prop them up in terms of popularity and set them up for success on those streams. But I just thought that people's reaction to that was very weird because it's also insanely weird that he would not have been paid. I mean, a question that you should obviously ask.
What they tried to do, Monty, is they tried to make it sound like 2012 and 2013. 2012 was when Dyrus joined TSM, if people don't know. They made 2012 sound like 2002, Monty. You know how they were like describing the esports?
Yeah.
Like, the joke is it was already mega established by then. Like, League was one of the games that went huge, obviously. You guys were making it sound like it was the early days of like Counter-Strike or something. Like, hey, just to get a salary is good. And you know, they pay his travel and hotel fees. Like, what are you talking about? You're like 10 years out of date, you boomer.
Yeah, whatever. I do think it's a little bit odd, but I mean, those times, like, he wasn't paying for his accommodation. And my real question, Thorin, is does he own part of TSM? Because I think that's the real question you ask.
That would be an interesting question.
If he wasn't paying salary, because you also have to remember that another expectation of being on TSM, and this is very crucial to explain to people who came in later, is that the pro players who were on the team were required to write champion guides for solo mid.
Oh, in the early days. Yeah, sure.
So this is pre-LCS, obviously. Yeah. But part of the job, which apparently Dyrus wasn't getting paid for, was that to be on the team, he had to create guides of how to play Singed or whatever for solomid.net. They were expected to be content creators for the website.
Are you ready for the joke, Monty? Obviously, the worst part about this is Reginald wasted the most layup dunk he can do on anyone in history, which is when Dyrus was annoying him, he could have said, Dyrus, I don't pay you to talk because I don't pay you. Pretty good, right? And if he talked back to him, there you go. It's a good one.
Dyrus is a huge guy. I don't know why he didn't just deck Reggie.
You know the saddest thing about that whole scenario is, like, in a way, to rewind back to the talent conversation, Dyrus to me always was the worst example of Stockholm syndrome. Because what's sad is I actually like Dyrus. Like, the sad thing is, to me, he is a fucking pull and a half. He reminds me of that character from the classic 80s movie, The Never-Ending Story. The guy who's like that rock biter, you know, that really cool guy who's sort of hanging out with his friends, like, I had such these big hands, I couldn't keep the things I loved close to me. He has like a tragic quality to him, you know. He's like, he's a simple guy, but he's got this like purity to him, you know, his purity of spirit, as it were. And then to see someone like that just twisted up by the Machiavellian demons of an idiot like Reginald, by the way, and Riot, it's like, it's so sad. And at the end, just like all the LEC talent, they all just come back like, well, it's not their fault. They're good guys trying to do what they can. It's like, oh, I can't handle this. This is doing my head in, mate.
Yeah, I mean, if Reggie was a good human being, what he should have done in that scenario is, if he's not going to pay his players and he's going to force them to write guides for solomid.net and they're going to be streaming and creating his brand, they should at least own part of that brand. Like, shouldn't they have some level of equity in the company?
Basically, my problem is Dyrus is Prince Harry and Reginald's Meghan Markle. That's my basic problem. To summarize with a topical reference, there you go. That's my problem with that scenario. He's ruined him completely. He's destroyed everything he's done for. So it's over now.
All right. You ready to do some viewer questions now? If we hit on everything? All right. We're going to take a quick break, guys. And when we come back, we'll do viewer questions.
Right, we're back for viewer questions, which are, of course, always sourced from our Discord. If you, as well as our sponsors and all the other things we do online, liking the video or subscribing, one of the best ways you can support Last Free Nation and our content is by subscribing on Discord. And then one of the perks is there's a channel and you get to ask questions. So check out the Last Free Nation Discord and the subscribe options if you would like to ask a question yourself in a future episode.
That's right. And you Grog Coin former people can still ask questions because I had a baby, so I haven't reimbursed you yet. So sorry about that. We'll get around to it. And then you can subscribe on Discord. So there you go. Our favorite, Mr. Butt Pounder 420. When can we expect Elephant to enter the market of degenerate hyper-parasociality and debut its very own ASMR girlfriend VTuber?
That thing is, you probably would make fuck tons of money if you did that really cynically, you know. It's probably a good angle.
So here's my theory, Thorin. I think that what a lot of these a lot of streamers are going to do is become VTubers as they get older. Because they don't want to be like 45 and playing Fortnite. So I think they're going to transition into becoming VTubers eventually. Besides, also, guys, a ton of you use us as ASMR already. You guys go to sleep listening to the show all the time. That's one of the comments I get most of all. You know, the number of people who've been like, I used to go to sleep listening to you and Doa cast LCK. All right. I already am your ASMR in certain ways. How exactly do contract buyouts work? Is the new org paying a fee to take over the player contract, paying to dissolve the old contract? Are they also responsible for the player salary? The answer is it depends. So sometimes, a player's contract will have to be bought out. And so basically the contract is then reassigned to the new team for the same amount of money, right? Otherwise, sometimes the people who are buying the contract like make a dissolve the old contract and make a new deal with the player.
Right? Usually in esports, it's more that you're just ending their contract by paying the org, and then you start a new one with them and sign for however many years. Yeah.
So there's an agreement with the player that they will also dissolve the old contract because they want the new contract instead. So there's a couple different ways. The problem
at the moment in esports is this, because I can tell you, obviously Counter-Strike's more the game that does the buyouts at the moment rather than the league. In Counter-Strike, the main problem at the moment is most team orgs won't write an actual number in the contract itself, because when they have done that, Monty, I can tell most times they underestimated and the player became huge and they had to sell him for like 100k or 150k. What they tend to do is there is no listed buyout, and then as a result, it just becomes a back and forth negotiation. And that's why in Counter-Strike, there are buyouts that could be like $1 million or something crazy.
Yeah. Or, there's also, I think there are probably clauses now where the players get a percentage of the buyout. So, like, if they become really good,
I know agents want that shit for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different ways that buyouts work. There's probably more that we didn't mention, but there's many different ways to do that. For Monty, what got you into Muay Thai specifically as opposed to any other combat sport? So I don't have a lot of interest in jiu-jitsu, just fundamentally. Part of why I wanted to do a striking martial art was just for the workout of it, because the cardio workout is about a bazillion times more intense than BJJ. So purely as a way to get in very good shape, I think Muay Thai is a better option. And then as far as other, like, I wanted to have at least a somewhat effective striking martial art, and Muay Thai it's used in MMA because it's the most effective striking martial art there is, basically, because you use, it's the art of 8 limbs. You use knees, you use elbows, you use every part of your body. And basically they took the Thai form of kickboxing and then just realized that you could do Western boxing as well and integrated it into the martial art. So it's a very modern martial art in many ways, because it's already the current iteration of Muay Thai is a fusion of Western boxing and then traditional Thai kickboxing. And I just like it. I just enjoy it. I enjoy watching it. Like, I'm not a big MMA guy. Like, I tend to watch more of the one championship stuff that does the pure Muay Thai fighting, because I just like watching it more as a sport. if that makes sense. So that's why I kind of chose it. It was a combination of being a good workout, me wanting to do striking, it being an efficient form, like an effective form of self-defense, if necessary. Like I don't go and get into real fights. Obviously, that's stupid. I would just run away. Don't want to die that way. But yeah. If Elephant and other associated content creators, Loco, LS, etc., were to be a soccer team, who would play what position based off their personalities? I'm not sure I know all the soccer positions. What, it's just striker, midfielder, defense, and
wingers,
goalie?
like on the side. And
Yeah.
it's more just like the types of, basically there's just defender, midfielder, and forward, and somewhere then goalkeeper.
Yeah.
The rest is just which side of the pitch you play on, So in this, he more means like we're sort of doing archetypes here. So like the one that would probably surprise people is I'm not actually going to do what people think. People think I would put myself as like the striker or something. But no, here's the thing. I'm probably actually, if you know football, something like a defensive midfielder. Because actually, if people don't know, one of the things I do with my work is I actually set other people up quite a lot as well. Think of all the fucking talk shows, interview. Like I actually think one of the main things I'm able to do, I often talk about this on my talk shows, is I just know when to flip the switch. I know when to go a bit wild and be eager indulgent myself, but then sometimes I know when to just play the background character and set up the show so it's good. So I would be something more like that, I think. And what were the other ones? Loco Doco.
LS
Loco
or
Doco would have to
other
be something ridiculous.
people.
I feel like Loco Doco would be something like a winger or some player that like can make runs and try crazy shit, and it's not the end of the world if he misses, something like that. I don't know what for LS, because the joke for LS is he'd just permanently be on the injury report, straight fire joke. LS. So there you go. He'd keep saying like, I'll be there on Saturday, and then on Friday night he'd go, oh sorry, I've come down my throat, I don't think I can make it tomorrow, and then he'd just permanently be injured, wouldn't he? So there you go. He's on the bench, LS's bench, self-bench of course. If you actually know him as a person, that's straight fire as well. But it's a spoiler. I love the guy, but there's a reason why a lot of the talk shows he does, you'll notice, aren't on the same day every week. And he's the main reason as far as I know. So love him, but also
maybe don't happen
downsides.
A lot of the time.
True, yes. Exactly.
Does the LEC 1 seed have a higher chance of upsetting an LPL LCK 4th seed at Worlds than a tier 2 team in CS at upsetting a top 5 team at a major? So,
well, here's what's funny. I'm actually going to go ahead and say that the latter, the Counter-Strike one, is way more likely. And here's why, Monty.
Okay.
Because the level of familiarity is insanely more in the favor of the tier 2 team. The tier 2 team probably already has played and maybe even scrimmed some real pro teams. They play in the same region, and in qualifiers, they might already have played a top team. The real problem I've always said in League is keeping the regions apart. The issue you have is, even like a G2, like think of Yike. So Yike on G2 until MSI had never played a single team that wasn't from his region, ever. So when he's going against, T1 or Gen G, forget even if he's worse than them, he's going to be shitting his pants a bit because he's just not familiar with playing them and the pressure of the moment. In Counter-Strike, the reason why if you watch the RMR, the qualifier for the major, you will always get a random tier 2 team that just qualifies is because, look, part of it's luck and form, but it's also, I really do think that like familiarity removes it's the reason why people are afraid of the unknown, Monty. Even if it's really horrible what you do know, just knowing it gives you a chance to conceptualize it, to figure out how to battle it, to give you to believe it's possible. So I actually think it's the latter. I think actually the tier 2 Counter-Strike team has a better chance.
I think that's a very fair assessment. For Monty, I'm a big Warcraft 3 fan. Probably my favorite game of all time. I feel like I missed the prime of esports, though, as I didn't get into the esports side until well after I initially started in 2008. Oh, it's quite late for Warcraft 3. Any chance you could make a video going over a VOD of a prime game in history? Maybe one you cast yourself. Wow.
That'll be a fun nostalgic thing, right?
It would be. I will say that if you were, this is not the question you asked. It would be fun for me, first off. And I could probably also get some other people who are knowledgeable about Warcraft 3 to do that. Like Moonglade, the former caster, the Australian guy who used to cast StarCraft here in Korea, is a former...
the joke is it's not impossible. You could get Grubby to do it, mate.
I could get Grubby or Freak. I mean... I'm sure Grubby would be honestly, if I asked Grubby to like come on his stream and like have the two of us talk about old Warcraft 3 content, he'd probably do it. I mean, he's a very nice guy. I know him.
Yeah.
Moon is out of the military and has been for a couple years and has been competing again. I would say if you are interested in going back to that content, the biggest content in the kind of like prime era of Warcraft 3, so like 2004. I mean, Warcraft 3 is still happening at a high level in China. You can still watch
played
it.
in China, yeah.
There's still very good players who are active. Moon's active again. A bunch of the really
and
good...
if people don't know, some of the people who went to StarCraft 2 when it died out just went back. In the same way as the Brood War players went back to Brood War, some of the Warcraft 3 players came back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so, I mean, Grubby, I still think plays it on his stream. So basically the matches you would want to look out for from the kind of era you missed is just remember that WCG was the most important competition for Warcraft 3 because it was an actually pretty international game. And so that's when you got an international LAN. And then there were some broadcasts by MBC Game and OGN in Korea that featured a bunch of the really good Korean players from back in the day. And those were all televised. This was during like the Brood War era. And so they did some of that. And then the other ones were ESL's like online league, which was WC3L. And that's what Freak and I would cast.
The team league.
Yeah, it was a team league. And that was, it contained players from all over the world and they just played with lag, basically.
Yes. But if people don't know, that's actually a rare example of a game that was doable on like 120 ping, right?
It wasn't great.
No, but the point is, in Counter-Strike, you'd never win a single game if I have 20 ping and you have 150.
Sure.
But
yeah,
it was possible if you were Moon, you could actually beat someone 120 ping, right?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the most serious. That's why, the Korean leagues and like, WCG was so important. There were some Blizzard events as well. There were some Blizzard LANs that were held in Korea. Here's a fun one for you guys. There's a very famous picture of Freak in one of those like Brood War style like space jumpsuits that from a Blizzard event. Oh man, I'm gonna have to see if I can find it. It's so funny.
Okay, what would that be called? Okay,
I'm just gonna try and see if I can find this. Like, where would I find this? I'll have to look for it because it's just like, it's too funny. So he's in this like shiny silver onesie. Oh, what did you search for?
Just Google Freak Warcraft Space 3 and it's like on the top line. He's in like a Blizzard outfit. It's like the jumpsuit, yeah?
Yeah.
You see it?
No, oh yes, I do. Okay. Yes. Yeah, he's in like a Blizzard.
Yeah, put it there.
Yeah, okay, I got it.
You can see it's him from his face, even though it's a lot thinner. You can see it, yeah. And the big look at the like CRT monitor or old TV behind him. That's an old TV, I think. But yeah, look how old this picture is.
So yeah, there were some. He was competing, I think, at an event in Korea when that picture is taken, if I recall correctly. So there you go. Let me see. Hold on, guys. I'm gonna have to. In order to get
its own way, that looks cool, actually. Though that does actually look quite cool.
No. It's just funny. Here, hold on, guys. I'm gonna turn off. I have to get into Discord to get this picture real quick, and I'll put it up for you guys. So
also, by the way, if someone tries that very Google image search I just said, Freak Warcraft Space 3, you'll find a lot of funny pictures. There's a lot of really great ones. Okay, here.
So this is a Photoshop picture that you sent me, Thorin.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he's like next to the sleeping guy. This was like a meme.
Right. But obviously, that's
like
the original picture,
meme that somebody made. But the original picture is him in the spacesuit. So I'm going to show you. This is not a real picture, guys. It is him photoshopped hilariously behind the sleeping guy. But let me just pull it up for you so you can see it. Here you go. So there's Freak in his spacesuit.
By the way, as a random aside, because obviously fans in League won't know this, me and Monty, when we worked with Flashpoint, the Counter-Strike organization a few years back, used to do a weekly show where to introduce you to the players, because they weren't so famous, we would have like a different pro or a coach from a team come on. And we did this once, or maybe it was even an interview actually on Flashpoint. It might even have been on Flashpoint. We did, I think, a post-game interview with a player. It's actually a player, by the way, who's a top player in Valorant now. He plays for Sentinels, called Dapper, D-A-P-R. And when we did this interview with him, in the background, because he's just in his room because it was COVID, on the table, I'm not joking, you could see a massive bottle of lube and like
a bong
and like a bomb or something. It's just right there behind you, like, oh, just clean up the room or something. Fuck, you know, it's like a Seth Rogen movie or something. I know it's metal.
Okay, go to the next question. As
it.
people reach the top of their field, what would you say is one of the darker aspects of striving for excellency that people ignore or simply don't know about? The fact that you don't do anything else. Like, people just don't realize that if you want to be truly exceptional at something, you don't have dimension as a person. You are monomaniacal a lot of the time in your pursuit of this thing. And oftentimes these people have very boring lives. It's like what we were talking about, like Cadril earlier. Do you think Cadril did anything in the last 2 years that wasn't League of Legends related? No. You know,
I saw a clip the other day where he said on his stream, and he wasn't joking, by the way, some fan asked him, how often do you order takeaway? And he said 3 to 4 times a day.
Yeah, you have
so he's just sitting in his house, just ordering takeaways all day long, guys. He's not ever leaving. It's ridiculous. It's almost like look, he is getting paid mega bucks, but that's almost like he's like self-imprisoned himself in his own home. Yes. Like, that's mad. Yeah.
But people who are experts on topics, like, you know, if you're going to be a 3-star Michelin chef, what the fuck do you think you're doing all day?
Oh, of course.
You are at the market hand selecting the ingredients that you're using. You are managing your staff. You are coming up with new dishes, right? It's not only the time that you're spending in service, it's all the time that has to go into the research and the sourcing of everything that you use. How do you become the best brain surgeon in the world? By doing a bazillion brain surgeries, more than you would have to do for your normal, you know, paycheck. And the only thing you think about is brain surgery. So there's always a price of time and happiness, and being able to be a well-rounded person. That's the price you pay for expertise a lot of the time. So you better really love it.
I would say, like, I would just give the example. You can go and look this up, some like homework you can do. If you just go and look up online, like Kobe Bryant talking about like his training regime, you will realize what Monty is talking about. Because he essentially explains that like most NBA players do like one workout and then they work out with the team, right? But he basically figured out his whole day so that he'd like work out at like 4 a.m, like 4 till 6. Then he'd go home and have like breakfast. Then he'd come back and do like 10 till 12. Then he'd go home and have like lunch. Then he'd come back and do like 3 till 5. Then he'd practice with the team and then he'd go to sleep. And the premise was, because every other one of his peers did one workout on the team, he was just getting like light years ahead. But you can imagine, think about his schedule. There's no time in there for anything else. Like besides like, you know, spend an hour with his kids and have some food with them. He is like, there's no time there, you'll notice, to be like a painter or like watch loads of movies in Netflix or go out to the park. Like his whole day is used because he's just trying to be the best at one thing, basketball. It'll make you a weird person, unfortunately.
And also, like, good luck having a family that cares about you. You know what I mean? Like, do you want to raise your kids? No, somebody else is like. Yes. I know people like this. I know lawyers and doctors who have a fucking armada of nannies, and yeah, these people make $1 million a year, but then they spend $200,000 on childcare for the kids that they never see.
Take the image off the screen. It's just still on the screen. Take it off.
Take it off.
Just him lying next to that
guy. So it's just the price you're willing to pay, right? Do you only care about that thing? Well, you know, you're not going to see your family. Hope you have a spouse that's is cool with this and going to support you, because guess what? Your spouse is probably cheating on you if you're not spending time with them. So
you better also notice, like these examples, you better become a massive millionaire and mega successful at it too, by the way. Try doing this life, but being like some independent comics artist, you know, making fuck all money. You won't have a family, mate. They'll just leave, I'm telling you.
I mean, like, I've heard stories. There isn't that many. There's not that much information about Cormac McCarthy's personal life because he was notoriously private. But there have been comments from like his first wife where the dude would literally just eat beans out of a can because he just wanted to write, and he refused to do anything else that would actually make money. And I mean, he became, in my opinion, maybe the best author of the 20th century, but the price was crazy, and certainly he didn't keep that wife. You know what I mean? So it's just there's always a price. There's always a price. Esports fans seem to be anti-intellectual and attack people with nuanced opinions and who partake in interesting discussions. I would say sports fans are like this as well. That's my aside on this one. I think it's sports or esports fans.
By the way, I actually think I've nailed the reason why, though, Monty, which is this, right? Here's what I think they think we're doing when we talk on a talk show or we do predictions. They're doing what they do. So as a fan, they don't actually analyze the game. They just emotionally invest in a player or a team, right? So what they mean when they say T1 will win this match is I want T1 to win this match. So unfortunately, if you don't know, one of the secrets of humans is they tend to just project a theory of mind onto other people that's just themselves. So what they do for real, I think, Monty, is I'll give you an example. You know, when Wolf was obviously doing was watching Worlds. You know this from the Monty Wolf show. Wolf is an enormous T1 fan. That is the team he would choose to win. But he himself predicted LNG would beat them at Worlds because everyone thought at the time, Scout looks awesome, the team's awesome, the LPL. They thought they'd win. Right? When he did that, fans thought that he was like betraying T1. They didn't understand. He wants T1 to win. He just thinks LNG will. So I think that's, in my opinion, half of why these fans get mad at like hypotheticals, like this shouldn't happen. They think that we're saying what we want to happen in the world. Whereas like to me, like I don't even know what world you're living in when you think it's like that. Like the whole joke of esports, there's plenty of things happening I don't want to. To me, analysis is you just say what will happen. So go on then, hit the rest of the question.
Oh yeah, it just says, however, this seems to be also a trend in the larger cultural zeitgeist, especially on the internet. Do you think this bleeds into esports and is what's causing all this hatred? Or do you think there's something specific to esports? No, I think this is human nature. And obviously you see this in politics. You see this with K-pop fans, with fucking Taylor Swift fans. Here's the difference, guys. People were always this way. It's just that every idiot didn't have a social media account.
Yes.
The morons didn't have a way to communicate their stupid thoughts to you. These people were there. They were just yelling at their television or like writing letters to the editor that nobody ever saw. Now everyone sees everybody else's stupid fucking opinion. And obviously the people who are most irrational and angry are going to be the ones who spend all their time typing little words into the internet. The normal fucking people are just gonna be like, I enjoyed that content, and then just watch it and move on with their lives, right? So I don't know. Like, I think it's always been there. I don't think it's unique to the internet. I just think that social media and the internet have made dumb people accessible. There was for a long time, there was a pretty good restraining mechanism on dumb people, but now that's just gone. Like, in order to be featured in media, sure, there was gatekeeping involved that was negative. That's the negative part, is that they could keep opinions out that they really just didn't agree with. And so it wasn't really an open forum of discussion. So there were bad parts to that as well. But one of the good things is that there was at least a fucking filter so that, you didn't hand the megaphone to the moron. What do you prefer when traveling? Solo travel or traveling with others? I enjoy both.
The thing
for
about
different
that one
reasons.
is, to me, I feel like it's got to be solo in the sense that, like, if you've done enough travel like I have in my job, I just sort of know how to keep myself entertained. Like, I've even figured out after all the million flights, like, sort of the order of how to use my energy. Like, I don't, for example, like, start out watching the movie, Monty. Like, I do that at the end if I can't sleep and I'm just sort of, like, fucked off, I start with the book when I've got the most energy and it's still I try to figure out roughly when I'm going to eat. So I think I've just gotten good at, like, using my time well. So I actually just like doing my own thing. In fact, I find travel's a really good excuse to read a book or to do something solo.
I just have to have people who, I'm happy to travel with other people. It's just they have to be on board with the way I travel, which is often quite adventurous. Like, I get bored at resorts, and so I need to go like hike a mountain or be in the jungle for 3 days. And so if you're not willing to do that, then I'm just going to be very, very bored. So I
did once turn down an invitation from Monty to go on holiday with him. Are you ready, guys? Now, look, I was able to turn him down using a very valid excuse, which was at the time, I think it took place, Monty, like 2 days after like the CS major in Romania or something. So I did have a reason why I couldn't travel and I was tired. But low-key, I didn't want to do it anyway because Monty goes like, hey, wait, do you want to go to Egypt? And I was like, well, that sounds cool. But then he was like, no, we're going to go on we're going to rent a boat and just go on it all the way. And I was like, I don't know about this, mate. Like, being trapped on a boat with all these, even if the people I like, I don't think I can handle that, mate. Like, if it's in a resort, it's one thing, a hotel, but being on a boat, this even sounds, by the way, like some mad adventure we're doing. I don't know.
I mean, it literally is like the Agatha Christie movie, Death on the Nile, right? That's
Here's
the conclusion to that story, though. So I went with Susie before we were married. And so it was in 2015. It was right after the World Championship, because we were like, we're in Europe. And so we've got time off now that Worlds is over. So where do we want to go? Well, it was November. So that kind of limited our options if we wanted to go somewhere without shitty weather. And so we're like, I've always wanted to go to Egypt, like see all the historical sites. And so what we did was we booked a cabin on a dahabeeyah, which is like it's not one of the big cruise ships on the Nile. It's like a 12 cabin sailing ship. And
so it really is like the Death of the Nile thing, like that boat that you remember them in, right?
Yes. It was very small. So the funny thing about this, though, is it was from Aswan to Luxor. So you're going down the Nile, starting in the south and going up to Luxor, and you stop at a variety of places along the way. And it was, it's like 8 days, 7 nights or something like that. So we fly from Cairo. We spent a few days in Cairo, and then we flew down to Aswan, and we arrive and we get picked up by the tour company. And we ask, are we waiting for anybody else? Is anyone else going to come on this tour? And they're like, no, it's just you. And so for an entire week, we were the only people on this entire fucking 150-foot long boat. And there was like a hot tub in the middle, and they were making all our meals for us. We had private tours with just the two of us, and we paid the same amount of money. So we just had our own cruise ship. It was fucking rad. So you could have gone and nobody would have annoyed you. Except for me, maybe.
Couldn't know at the time.
Well, we didn't know either. It was just wild to show up in Egypt and then not just to have a private cruise. Amazing. It's like we paid for all 12 cabins by ourselves.
By the way, as an amusing anecdote, I'll very quickly tell. Someone I know in esports, I won't say who, they were from the Counter-Strike side, went to Egypt, Monty. And when they went there, they had all these crazy pictures for real, where it would be like a selfie of them with like an old statue, like doing an arm round, like selfieing. And I was like, how are you taking these pictures? And this is really depressing. They said, because the guy whose job is to be security is just some random local guy who doesn't give a fuck about any of this stuff. You just pay them like a very small bribe and they just do whatever you want. It's like, what? That's like all antiquity. Just what a world we live in. What a world. What a world.
All right. What's next? As we approach the starting dates of LEC, LCK, and LCS, please rate the following rebrands heading into 2024 from worst to low-key fire. Here we go. Giants and Excel merging to form Giant X.
The name Giant X is so ridiculous. It is bonkers, isn't it? At all. Go on, Giant X is up there. Okay, that's already a strong contender.
Especially with Twitter rebranding to X, it's like so funny.
I know.
It
also just sounds like you're censoring yourself. You're just a Giant X. What is X? I can't say right now.
Live Sandbox rebranding to Fear X. I feel that the name Live
X at all.
So I feel like the name Live Sandbox though was already stupid, so it's less stupid. Like Giants and Excel. Excel was kind of dumb because you think about Microsoft Excel, and Giants is kind of whatever, but Live Sandbox was just a fucking terrible name, and now it's the same amount of terrible.
And should I tell you something mad that no one else will know except me, because this is a cultural poll? There was a movie in the 2000s called Fear X with John Turturro that was made by the guy who made like fucking Drive and stuff. And it's a story about, I think it was about like an author who had like some sort of hallucinations or something. It's actually called Fear X. Literally the name they picked. Yeah, it's from like 2003. So like, by the way, these are all shit names so far. What was the other ones? Is those two?
We're getting
Giant X, Fear X. Go on.
Jung-hoon renaming to Execute because now he's playing in
People don't know. Yes, the Astralis players would change his name. Yes,
I actually think Execute, especially because he's like a pike. He's like a pike main.
There you go.
It's like a good. I think that's a good branding for him.
That's good.
Nicole LaPointe Jameson rebranding the ex Warren Buffett of esports.
That's a good one. That's actually a good one.
That's a good
rebrand.
So he did the Giant X, Fear X.
Also, you know, one thing we actually missed as well, the irony of this, which is, you know, that the person who replaced her, they're like, I think that was name like Chris something or other.
Yeah,
you know, they also
Dapalone,
tried to do the same. They tried to take the analogy and extend it, didn't they? Said, well, he's sort of like the Charlie Munger. Well, the irony is Charlie Munger's dead now, by the way, guys. So I didn't do that. The universe made that punchline, not me. Okay, so.
But I do like the question because it's Giant X, Fear X, Execute, and X Warren Buffett of esports. That's quite clever. Well done.
Okay,
well done, Noble Rabbit 561. I think.
What's the actual worst one of them? Like, for real, jokes aside, what is the worst of those four?
So I'm going to forgive Live Sandbox a little bit because it was already bad. So it's not that much
Live Sandbox
worse.
Isn't a good name anyways.
Yeah. True. So it's like, whatever. Giant X is definitely the worst because
it's pretty bad.
What the fuck, man? Why not just go with Giants? You know what I mean? Like, it's right there. Why do you have to? Why does it have to? Here's the question
to merge
for you,
the Excel part or something.
Why do people have such egos about garbage brands in esports? Nobody cares about the Excel brand. Nobody.
Also, here's the obvious joke, Monty. They had a choice. They had to somehow combine, Monty, part of the word giant, so they took giant, and they had to combine part of the letters X and L. Why not just go with Giant L?
There you go.
It was right there the whole time. It was right there the whole time. Giant Honestly, L. That's what they should have called the team.
Fans would have loved that.
That would be the meme potential would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be great because people will immediately jump to the fact that, like, when they lose, you say Giant L. But here's the thing: you can actually do social media posts where, when you win, you're handing Giant L's to your opponents. Right? It could go both ways. It'd be really fun.
Yeah.
I like Execute as a name for Junghoon. I think it's good.
It's quite cool. Yeah.
And my favorite is
player, but yeah.
my favorite is obviously Nicola Point Jameson. Hopefully never touching the industry of esports again.
That is incredible, isn't it? Dude, the thing I still can't handle is, like, the fact that everyone thinks it's fine that she just deleted her whole Twitter account. Like that, I'll just memory hole this entire thing I did publicly. Never happened. Never happened, of course.
I feel bad for the Golden Guardians people because
isn't that mental that's gone?
They deleted their Twitter. So if you were a social media manager or a graphic designer, now there's just no proof of anything that you did while working for the Golden State Warriors. If you want some, like, viral social media posts, like you're saying, the numbers all be gone. Yeah, why have you done that? Hope you screenshotted it. Like, what the fuck, man?
By the way, that's another thing people do in esports. Like, you know, sometimes people have just, like, deleted whole YouTube channels that had all content on them. It's like, why not just leave it up? Like, what does it gain you to delete it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just silly, innit?
Now that 2023 is over, what's one thing you are proud of and one thing you would have liked to have done differently this year?
Okay. So proud of and, like, almost like regret or something you wish you could do differently or do right this year, right?
Well, one thing
the obvious one is I regret that we didn't get our company funded the way we thought we were going to. So I hope to do that right this year. There's an obvious one for the regret, right? So that's a layup right there.
I would have liked to have streamed more this year, but I had to, like, take over a bunch of the business stuff. But I do think I'm going to stream more in 2024. So, like, I was sad because I was actually enjoying doing a lot of the bangers only at the start of 2023, and I think it was kind of a bummer that we never really got that rolling. But yeah, I think it's looking better right now for this coming year, and I'm excited to do that again. So, and one thing I'm proud of is, you know, sticking with LFN and continuing to pump out the content. As I said, the numbers have been really good, and we continue to grow, and I'm very proud of what we're building.
I can tell you the answer because it's actually a simple one to this for me. So if people don't know, those, like, really short videos, like, I know I did the Deft one in 2022, but in Counter-Strike, I did some in 2023 that were those, like, short little, like, hype type videos with all the B-roll, right? Those are some of the features I, like, sort of do care about the most. I actually think those, if you get them right and you nail the tone, they could actually be sort of evergreen, and years from now you could watch one of those. So if people don't know, we are going to do more of those this year, but the problem is I need to get a new editor for that. So you'll see it soon on the social media for Ask V Nation, but I'm going to do, like, a public thing where I basically ask editors to apply, and we're going to find someone that's exactly the type of content they want to make, and I'm going to do loads of those, hopefully.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we'll do, you know, you'll see more of this year. Fortunately for us, you know, a lot of the people who work in this industry are very interested in working with us and helping build out the project. So there's like potential documentary content that people are interested in making. We've got a bunch of stuff that I think we'll be working on. Monty, Was your visit to Okinawa the inspiration for your son's name? So this may sound weird, but there is a beer that is made in Okinawa called Orion, which is the main beer that they make there, and it's one of the biggest beers that is produced in Japan, and you can get it all over the island.
Okay.
So yes, actually, is the answer to that question, because we were talking about Greek mythology names, as I discussed earlier on the show. I was talking about Perseus, and Orion is another figure in Greek mythology. And so definitely I would say that conversation happened as a result of us being in Okinawa. Also, we were joking about the fact that in Korea, there is a beer called Max. And so Max, we could get a glass that says Max on it. And it hilariously,
Right.
then Orion, we could also get like an Orion beer glass. So there were some jokes about that. But I think we probably would have come up with that name anyway, even if we hadn't been there, but it was certainly part of the conversation. That's actually very funny that you asked. You must know Okinawa quite well. They have if you look up Orion beer, they also have a sick logo. It's a very cool logo. And if you're in Okinawa, they sell like 1 million t-shirts and stuff with the Orion beer logo on it.
Okay. I'm looking forward to the arrival of the third of your children, Colt 45.
I can just name him Colt, you know.
That wouldn't even be bad. The joke is that wouldn't even work, sadly. I should have picked some else, but whatever.
Budweiser. Anti-philosopher and psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan argued for a psycholinguistic consciousness in which the unconscious mind and in return the conscious mind are formed through semiotic systems. Yes, man, I haven't read Lacan since I was in college, so we'll see if I can even answer this question. Famously stating the unconscious is structured in the most radical way like a language. Do you guys have any interesting takes or beliefs about human consciousness and its evolution? So I did read some of Lacan's work when I was in college. I actually did have a class that was dedicated to literary psychoanalysis, where it included Freud and some of the other semiotics scholars. You know, I talk about Carl Jung a lot of the time. We talk about unconscious quite a bit in these questions and in general. I think that I've stated this before, but people think they are far more in control of themselves than they actually are. The unconscious is hugely impactful in terms of your decision making, the illusion that you have free will, your emotional states. Like, you are controlled. And so pretending that your unconscious doesn't exist or not acknowledging its power and trying to like feel what it's doing is going to make you a slave to it in many ways.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like, put it this way, I would just say that from my experience, I would also include like experiences I've had with things like psychedelics and meditation and other sort of like a little bit more out there, not so mainstream things. I would say that, like, to me, I think of the mind really like an iceberg. Everyone thinks that, oh, I'm just this top part above the water. Like, that's the conscious part that maybe you do have some sort of purview over and control. Most of it is the uncharted, undiscovered part below the water that like maybe goes deeper than you realize, and is darker than you realize, and bigger than you realize. And so, for example, what you were saying at the end there, Monty, I think 99% of the problem when people have discussions about themselves or relationships, the problem is they're talking as though they were only the conscious part at the top of the iceberg. Like, I'll give you an example. If there's a big discussion, Monty, about like why do women do exhibitionist posts on Instagram, for example, if someone says to women, well, you're doing it as sort of part of your sexual marketplace tactic of attracting a mate, they might say, no, I don't do it for that. I just do it for my own reasons. Well, the problem they're having there, Monty, is I'm sure consciously they're telling the truth. They think in their mind, no, I did this because I wanted to see what I look like in this outfit. But what they're not addressing is that there might be unconscious desires or reasons to do something. And they might even be fulfilling an unconscious need that, because it's unconscious, they can't mentally address initially unless they specifically reflect upon that and look at sort of like things in their life. So I would say, actually, and this is one of the areas where I actually think people are kind of strange, because people do think of themselves as these small little creatures that are just labels in these boxes. But I feel like everyone is so much more sort of lurking beneath. They just don't explore it, you know.
Yeah, and also, people deny that the Jungian idea of the collective unconscious, that there is some sort of, kind of well of symbolism that transcends, that impacts all humans and affects all human cultures, and that these ideas like repeat over and over and over again in fundamental, like kind of naturally arising human religions or human belief structures or mythologies or stories,
I mean, you
right?
could tie it into like the sort of spiritual idea of like the Akashic record or something, right? The idea that
Yeah.
like there's something that humans just access that everyone everywhere can. It's like the internet; they can just access it somehow, seemingly, right?
Yeah. And also, I think that the other thing that people are resistant towards is the idea that your unconscious can be reprogrammed
Oh, of course.
through propaganda, through cultural, through media. Um, yes, it can be. And
As far as I
especially,
can tell, mate, nobody is impervious to propaganda. Nobody.
no.
Because the joke is, even when you like investigate and unpack it, you notice it still has an effect on you as you're doing that. That's one of the crazy things.
Yeah. And especially, everybody's going to have moments of vulnerability in their life. And that's when like cults strike.
Oh, of
That's when
course.
cults like pick people up. And, if you encounter the wrong idea or in some ways the right idea, but an idea at the wrong time,
Oh,
it can
absolutely.
completely
Yes.
take you over. And
Yes.
intelligent, rational people join cults, guys. And it's because they are dealing with something like maybe they had a loved one die or something like that, and they just get entranced, right? They're looking for some sort of meaning. So it's very powerful stuff. Do you have a favorite hero from mythology or a folk tradition who has had an impact on how you live today? I mean, obviously. Do you have favorite mythological figures / folk tales?
Yeah. I mean, if we're doing like antiquity, so it's probably Hector from the Iliad. I just think he's a brilliant example of someone who, like, what I like about the character of Hector is this: it's the notion of knowing that you just because you can't win doesn't mean you don't try and you give up. Like sometimes there, as much as people don't want to believe this, I actually think sometimes even if you battle and lose, the way you did it can be like in itself like symbolic in a way that does transcend the battle. Like I've always said, one of the things I think about life and philosophy is like this: even though people try to do a linear chain of effects, like I did action A, Monty, so you did response B, they will try to imply that like response B always had to follow action A, whereas I separate those things personally. So in my opinion, even if you are going to lose or there are bad things in the world, you still do your best. You still live to your ideals. You still fight in your way and refuse certain things and accept other things. And then you just let other people do what they will. So that's what that character to me represents. So there's one I've always been a fan of.
I love the Iliad in general, and Hector is a very interesting character too, because there are scenes in the Iliad where Andromache, his wife, is basically pleading with him just to like stay behind the
Of course.
walls
Yeah.
and fight fight with the archers and stay safe. And you have to understand that Hector knows that if Hector dies and Troy falls, he knows exactly what's going to happen to his newborn kid and his wife. The newborn kid is going to either get killed or enslaved, and his wife is going to get enslaved, because that's just how shit worked back then, right?
Yep.
The women were raped and enslaved. Your kids were killed or enslaved. The men were all killed. There were no war crimes. Everybody died or got enslaved. And yet he's like, and he is the most important Trojan warrior. So if he dies, the odds that Troy falls go up pretty significantly. And yet he continues just to roll out onto the Trojan plain and continue to fight people, even though his wife is like begging him not to do that. It's very interesting because he feels the duty to do that. And he thinks that that's his station within the world, is to go do this. And there's the constant idea that in the Iliad that you are competing for glory, right? And part of that glory, you go into combat even if you know you are going to die, like Hector does, because the price you pay for glory is dying. And they want to make that trade. Like Achilles knows he's going to die too, and he continues to go out there. By the way, I'm actually rereading the Iliad right now, and if you guys are curious or haven't read it, First off, read it. It's fucking great. And second off, there's a brand new translation by a classicist named Emily Wilson that has gotten very well reviewed. And so I wanted to check it out. And it is a really good translation of the Iliad. And it just came out, I think, last year. But she did one previously of the Odyssey, and it's great. It's a very, very good translation. So if you've been waiting to read it, this one's very readable. I would encourage you to check it out. As for a favorite hero from mythology, I mean, I have like Odin's ravens tattooed on my back, so I tend to like Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Aztec mythology. Like I love Odin as a mythological figure. I love Tezcatlipoca from Aztec mythology as a mythological figure. I don't really have a particular affinity for any of the Greek gods, but I just enjoy the stories. I would say like Ovid's Metamorphoses. It's not Greek, it's Latin, but whatever. You guys know. The Iliad is one of my favorites. So these kind of folk traditions have absolutely had a massive impact on my life to the degree that basically, you know, I have a college degree in mythology and this kind of storytelling. Also, the book Parsifal by Wolfram von Eschenbach is an has had an enormous effect on me. The Hato translation of that is very good. If you like Knights of the Round Table shit.
I think in general, by the way, just the concept of like the Code of Knights and stuff like that is actually also something I find actually like super powerful. Anytime I saw it's like super appealing to me for some reason.
Yep. Read Parsifal. It's the fucking peak of that. We always make fun of Zoomers / nephews on this show, but let's take a moment to appreciate them today. Name some good qualities Zoomer generation possesses that generations before them didn't.
Well, that's like the fucking $1 million question right there.
I think Zoomers generally like have a pretty good sense of humor about themselves. I would say that. Like, I don't think they're super precious. Like, I think they have an ability to laugh at themselves and find humor in their own ridiculous behavior a lot of the time. I appreciate that.
I don't have an answer for this. I can't really think of anything.
All right. Any funny drinking stories to share? Oh my God. This feels dangerous.
There must be some that can be like PG, you know what I mean? There's got to be some that bad. Let me think. All right, well, there we go. You referenced it on the last episode. If people don't know, the actual backstory that you didn't know at the time when we did the episode, I think like 2015 with Emily Rand, and she was repping the LPL Atlas, is Monty was just mega hungover because in Korea, he used to have to do the show at like 9 in the morning or something, so he'd just been out all night drinking, right? So he wasn't even like he was drunk, but he was just in a bad mood, basically.
Well, I was still drunk. It was one of those days where, you know, you'd been out drinking the night before and you wake up and you're like, shit, I'm still like a little bit drunk right now. It's not hungover. Okay. The hangover comes later. You're like, shit, I'm still drunk. Here's one. This is going to be an abbreviated version of this story. So when I was in college, consistent with my love of Viking mythology, I used to host a giant Viking feast. So every year I would throw a massive party and roast giant legs of lamb. And basically everybody who wanted to come would chip in for crates of mead. And so we'd all get together and eat like a bunch of meats and like apples and shit and have like Viking recipes. And there'd be like Viking stories that be read and like Longfellow poems and like all this other shit. It's very like dirty literature thing to do, but people got really drunk. So one of the things that I did as a joke one year was I made Mjolnir. And what I mean by made Mjolnir, which is Thor's hammer, is I had like a construction hammer, like a carpentry hammer, right? And to make it electric, I taped a stun gun to the top of it. So it was like one of those stun guns that like arcs electricity. But in order to keep the electricity on, because if you guys know, they have a switch and then a trigger, right? So you can't just hold it down. So I
Right.
taped the trigger down so I could just flip the switch and have it arc electricity on the end of my hammer. Anyway,
Did
long
it
story,
electrocute the fuck out? Yeah.
long story
That's where
short,
we're going,
I
right?
stun gunned myself.
There you go. Of course. And was it really painful?
No, it just made me fall out of a chair.
Oh, okay. Right,
It doesn't really hurt. It more just
Right.
incapacitates you. Like all your muscles just stop working.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So I did make Mjolnir and then hit myself with it. That is a thing that happened while I was drunk. How do you guys like to cook your roast potatoes? Well, they're roasted.
Nailed it.
So
It's in the name. Yeah, you roast it. There you go.
they're
Problem
in the
solved.
oven.
Yeah. I mean, maybe this is where he's been going wrong. He's been mashing his roast potatoes. He's been, fucking, I know. He's been making fries out of his roast potato. You see, your problem is you haven't been literal enough, mate. You just roast them in it. But for the more serious answer, though, by the way, because the secret I can tell you from English cooking is take the fat of whatever meat you roasted as well and pour that motherfucker into potato pot. And it's going to make it amazing. I'm telling you right now.
That's also how you make Yorkshire pudding when you are roasting like prime rib, is you take all of the grease and then you put that in with the batter to make the Yorkshire pudding, and it's very good. Sideshow made a video on his Valorant channel about Saudi sports washing. Yes, you can find that link below. We talked about that. One of the comments defending the Saudis was, quote, "The people really love the royal family." What is your favorite so bad it's funny take you've seen? That's pretty good.
Oh, actually, you know what mine is, Monty, because I told you it. I said it in a little group that we're in. The worst take of all, and I believe, by the way, there was even someone, I think, in Counter-Strike who wrote a column that was along these lines where he tried to use this angle. His angle went like this, and this is the craziest copium I've ever heard as to why it's okay to work with the Saudis. He said, since at the moment, the whole point of why there's esports winter is esports loses massive amounts of money. If you actually think the Saudis are bad, isn't it good that they're losing all their money funding esports? Which is so insane. Because, no, it is, as sophistry, it's sort of clever initially, but the reason it doesn't work is because if you apply the same logic to everything, then we should all do everything we can with the most evil people ever, as long as we think it's a net negative for them. Which, by the way, would even imply, this is why I know this argument would never be made for anyone other than the Saudis. That would imply, for example, we should never cancel someone. We should embrace them further and then try and exactly. It doesn't make any sense.
We really should have just elected Andrew Tate president.
It ruined his whole life. Exactly. He'd be wasting his time with all that stuff in the office. He couldn't make any sexist comments then. But that's like the logic they're using. That's how stupid it is, isn't it? I know. That's why I say that might be like that's like the 3 stars best possible copium you can ever create in this world. It's so good in it.
It's not wasting their money. They don't think of it as wasting their money. They think of it as buying PR. That's what they're doing. They're buying PR. So they can lose. When you say lose money, they don't think they're losing money.
No, exactly. Think of the influence they get in the world. Exactly. It's worth it. It's worth it. That is insane.
What historical female character, real or fictional, would you date and marry? And how would they react to you telling them you're from the future or another world? What?
Did you say fictional or historical? Was it just
historical female character, real or fictional? So I guess it's kind of a weird question. So I guess it has to be somebody from the past.
See, here's the problem with that is this is where I feel like, in life in general, I am naturally an iconoclast. Like, there's just certain things I think are overrated or whatever. Here's my problem, Monty. In my luck, I would pick Helen of Troy, thinking, man, the face that launched 1,000 ships. I'd get there and it would just fucking be Zendaya or something. I'd be like, blood, what is this? Even in ancient Greece, they were fucking gaslighting everyone. What is this? Like, I'm not marrying her. Like, so there you go. But that's what probably happened to me, my luck.
I mean,
who are you thinking
to be fair, though, the gods said that Aphrodite said she was the hottest. That was Aphrodite's choice. All she offered Paris was she offered him the most attractive woman, and she thought the most attractive woman was Helen. Yes. So I feel like there's some safety in the Aphrodite seal of approval.
Could be. Who would you pick?
Until you find out that Aphrodite has some really weird kink,
Because, by the way, as an aside, I think in general, if you pick fictional is better for this, because I would just say this. I don't think there's anything wrong with the question, but people will be like, oh my God, that's a bit weird, isn't it? You're like just picking a woman and stuff. So I could get weird. So I'd say pick fictional ones for this one, maybe. Who would you pick? Who's your top of your list?
I don't know.
Morgana Le Fay, where we're going with this?
No.
We pick just like, pick it out in a way, you know. Cleopatra, where we going?
Cleopatra is a pretty good one. I mean, you got to be curious about why everybody wanted to bang Cleopatra, right?
If you ever read the description, they do make it sound like she's like straight fire. Yeah, like dime piece. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, or like, yeah. I think some of the ancient Egyptian historical women would probably be pretty interesting. I think that's pretty good. What are your thoughts on True Detective and Rust Cole's philosophy as a whole? It's been a while since I've watched that first season of True Detective, so I'm not sure I can comment on his philosophy right now. I will say that that season is fucking great. That is fucking great TV. I'm actually excited. There's going to be a new season of True Detective that's coming out in like a week. That looks really interesting. So I don't know. I thought that just the way Matthew McConaughey played that character was brilliant. It's certainly one of the most memorable television characters of all time, I think. Did you like that show?
I can, yeah. Oh, I think the first season is mega. But the problem is, here's the issue, right? Is even though the actual show is very good, in my opinion, it has a massive flaw, which I'll do a very quick rant on, which is, you know how when Quentin Tarantino, in his movies, they're all a pastiche of like things he liked from other films. But
Sure.
He's very, very obvious and transparent about it. Like you'll even sometimes see he's doing like a nod or an homage to that in the scene he does it in. Or he'll just say in interviews, oh, I love this movie, like the spaghetti western or this, you know, this like fucking grindhouse kung fu movie from the 70s or something. The difference is he's open and honest about who he's sort of like cribbing his ideas from. The main problem basically, and you can Google this and you'll find all the sources everywhere, is when you look into it, what a lot of people liked the most about True Detective was these Rust Cole speeches where he sort of opines or pontificates about reality and humor. The problem is, unironically, if you ever look, it appears that the writer, like Nick Pazziotto or whatever he's called, just basically took like great sections from like the horror writer Thomas Ligotti, for example, who did a book called The Conspiracy Against the Human Race. He did obviously like Robert Chambers, the fucking Yellow King, etc. He took sections. Yeah. He took even literally like a speech from an Alan Moore comic from, I think, like Strange Tales or something, or one of those ones, or Top 10. It took one of these, or Tomorrow Stories, one of them. He took like literal phrases and things and just reworded them and they put them in there. So unfortunately, he sort of like took banger lines or concepts from other people. Like, you know, all the stuff that Rust Cole does where he'll have things about like, you know, humans are just like it's just all a meat factory and we're all like, that shit's just all lifted from these like other books and stuff. And sadly, the guy in the interview, this is my problem, I've gone and looked, he very rarely ever references this, and some of them he's never acknowledged. Like he never acknowledged the Alan Moore one. At the end of the whole show in season 1, at the end, what gives it like a moment of light is that Rust Cole character says some sort of thing about, you know, we're all out in there, then stars, and in the end, if you look at the stars, isn't the light winning or something? That's just from an Alan Moore comic. That's an actual line like this like Egyptian god character says in an obscure Alan Moore comic. So my problem is just this. It does work out very well in the actual thing. Like this collage works. He nails it. My problem is I just think he sort of stole a lot of it. It seems like he plagiarized. So I'm a bit torn because I think it is a brilliant TV show, but I'm not a fan of people. Like I say, I'm okay as long as you just tell me where you got it from. If you just tell me what you took it from, then I think you're earnest. If you kind of hide it, I get a bit suspicious, basically.
I mean, look, if the pieces are used very well, I think, but yeah, I think it's certainly a bummer to hear because the Rust Cole character is obviously super interesting and his kind of like
that's part of the show, right?
Nihilism is very interesting, and what's so cool about the character is that he talks a lot about nihilism, and yet he still wants to actively solve these murders, even though according to his own philosophy, it shouldn't matter, right? So there's this tension in his character that he feels driven to do good in the world, even though he himself may not think that his actions matter, which is it's a cool dichotomy to have, right? Yeah. But I think you nailed it. If you read Alan Moore, it really does feel like this could be an Alan Moore graphic novel. Like,
oh, for sure.
It's very much inspired by Alan Moore's work as a whole, which is great because unfortunately with Alan Moore, the things that are supposed to be like Alan Moore are so not like Alan Moore. Like, why is Watchmen so fucked up? Why is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen so fucked up? Why did they make that terrible fucking sequel to Watchmen? Man, oh God, I watched that show. It was god awful.
It's terrible, isn't it? Yeah.
Like, I have to say, I was like excited by the first couple of episodes, and then just went completely off the rails. And I was like, "What the fuck, man?"
There's a reason. Wait, think about this, Monty. Think about all the things I've shown you. There's a reason I've never recommended that show to you, mate. Because the same thing. I saw the cast do it. That's like Jeremy Irons, and I remember thinking this could be amazing. It goes so badly, so quickly, doesn't it? Exactly.
But anyway, the new season of True Detective, I'm also excited about. But yeah, I did really like the first season of that show. With the NFL playoffs on the horizons, what are your guys' overall thoughts on how the season went for you? Players, coach, team performance, anything comes to mind? What do you mean went for me? It went.
I assume he means who you support or who you like or what your
went terribly. I'm a Broncos fan. In addition, predictions on who the teams with the head coach vacancy are going to hire for the position. Well, Jim Harbaugh, is, after winning the title with Michigan, is almost certainly, he's probably going to the Chargers, I guess, because Brandon Staley was shit, and you have Justin Herbert to work with, so that team could actually be good with good coaching. And also the Chargers
has experience, etc. Like he's been an actual coach before.
Yeah, and I mean he was very successful with the 49ers for a number of years. The Raiders are just a dumpster fire, so I don't know who the fuck's going to go there. The Panthers are also a dumpster fire. Their owner fucking sucks. Ron Rivera is no longer with the Commanders, Falcons, and Patriots. I think probably, I mean, why wouldn't Bill Belichick go to potentially the Falcons, right? I think he could end up somewhere in the NFC South, whether that's Panthers or Falcons. That seems kind of likely, I would say. He's certainly not going to retire. Like, I don't think he'll be working for the Patriots.
Oh, no. Anymore. He seems like a lifer. And also, if people don't know, one of the reasons I find that whole discussion, Monty, where people just try to do the comparison of like it's almost like they think they're doing the faker injury thing with Brady. You know what they do is they look at the Patriots before Brady left and they look after he left and they go, see, it must be Brady. You know what they're ignoring, dude? You'll know this from actually following the NFL. Dude, when the Patriots had that like last decade with Brady where they kept making all those Super Bowls and winning, there were constant news stories that were like, right, Robert Kraft agreed for one more season, I'll buy like another player or put more. But his whole thing was he knew eventually the Super Bowls would stop and then he was going to min-max. Like, they clearly aren't ever going to be the team, Monty, that just spends the biggest payroll every year. So if I'm Bill Belichick, eventually, if I'm not going to be in a position, why not just go to one of the best franchises or someone that has loads of money or someone who says, come in and just make a new project for me? Like, I think it would be a logical move at this point. He's done everything with the Patriots.
I think he's also probably a little bit salty that like Brady went and like won the Super Bowl the first year that he was out, on the Bucks. And so if I'm Bill Belichick, I want to prove that I can do the same thing. Right?
Wait, you can even go and do the same thing. Just go to some loaded team or some team with loads of money. Yeah,
you can go to the Chargers too, potentially, right? Like, I think out of all the teams you listed, the Chargers probably have the most
they have some mega
talent.
Pieces. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's probably going to be the most attractive. Like, come on, dude. Like, what's the list here? The Patriots suck right now, and they also didn't get a high enough draft pick to get a good quarterback, most likely. The Raiders are just a dumpster fire in terms of their ownership. The Chargers at least have Justin Herbert and some other good players. The Panthers are a disaster. They don't even have picks. So how the fuck do you even fix that team? Like, CJ Stroud turned out to be the better quarterback for the Texans. So now you're like, you picked the wrong guy and you have no picks, and the Bears got all your fucking picks. So you're just a train wreck. The Commanders suck, but the Commanders have new ownership now. So maybe that will help attract people. Falcons might be okay, but I think it's pretty clear. Like, the Chargers are probably the most attractive open coaching opportunity. But I think they'll go after Jim Harbaugh, personally. I think Harbaugh is just going to be done, partially because I don't think he wants to serve the time for the suspension that's probably coming his way from the Michigan sign stealing scandal. So I think he'll just peace out of college football and go back to the NFL. Plus, he just won the title today, so I think he accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. And I know the Broncos were talking to him last season. Who knows? As for how do you think this season went? I'm excited by the Ravens now. Like, it's really cool to see. I really like watching Lamar Jackson play. So it's very fun to see him like on an MVP kind of like road this year. And it seemed like last year was still pretty injured. And I've enjoyed watching the Ravens. I've been a bit bummed out by the Bills, but they did win that last game against the Dolphins. Dolphins have been honestly the biggest letdown. Like, look at how they started the season, and then
remember, people were projecting this could be the greatest offense in the history, and then that just went away, didn't it? Like,
yeah, they really faltered down the stretch. That's been a bit of a bummer. I've been happy to see the Chiefs struggling a little bit more, obviously, since I'm a Broncos fan. I think the Dolphins are probably going to be out of the playoffs early, which is not the fate you would have suspected for them at the start.
The problem I have with this season is it actually feels like there's a lot of parity. Like, I could actually see it being fairly wide open as to who could potentially win in the playoffs, but I actually think there's not a lot of great constructed rosters, Monty. Like, or there's teams where it's like they have the players but not the coach, or the coach but not the player. Like, there's not that many like all together squads, in my opinion. Like, if I ask like now, if we have to nail the absolute best teams, dude. The joke is some of them that were the best at the beginning of the season aren't the best at the end. And there's not that many that like even when, like, for example, I always say to me, obviously the 49ers have all these great pieces, but then they have obvious fatal flaws too. So I actually just think this, look, it's going to be good for excitement, but I think it's going to be really messy playoffs in my opinion.
Also, just the number of quarterback injuries this season and kind of like a shitty level of quarterback play. Like, are there even 10 good uninjured quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
No,
I don't think there are.
No.
That's felt bad too, right?
There's another thing, right? You can really see this season, as more so than the last. Dude, the changing of the guards completely happened at quarterback now. Like, the joke is, like, remember, Aaron Rodgers didn't even play it. Brady's gone. Like, dude, all the old guard is gone from the 2000. Big Ben, fucking, all of them, Drew Brees, they're all gone. At this point in time, who is the veteran quarterback at this point? The joke is Joe Flacco. Fucking Mahomes is actually even Flacco's around somehow. I don't know how but then again, he was always decent. He was never terrible. People went too hard with that one.
He was terrible on the Broncos, but yeah, he's been. The rest. Sure. The thing is, the rest of the Browns team is actually very good, especially their defense. But he's been a surprising one. He's been a surprising one for sure. I don't know. This season has just felt bad.
But this is easily the most uninspiring quarterback season I've seen ever, Monty. The joke is, we've already discussed this in the past. Unironically, people have to put like Brock Purdy for like MVP. Of the whole league, MVP. Like, the idea of someone like that, if you don't know, guys, there are seasons where like Drew Brees puts up like, I don't know, 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, and he can't even get a sniff at MVP, but Brock Purdy gets to win. Like, what? Well, this is what a world this is.
It's also like a lot of the kind of hyped up next generation of quarterbacks have been on either bad teams or teams with insanely bad coaching. So like, Justin Herbert's just in Brandon Staley prison.
Yes.
And, Trevor Lawrence, his entire team just breaks down and they don't make the playoffs. They just suck in the second half of the season. So a lot of the players that you would want to see doing well or potentially having a good playoff run have just been sabotaged by their own teammates or coaches. And now we get fucking Brock Purdy as one of the top seeds in the NFC. And look,
to me, that just shows you why I don't think always quarterback should be the MVP. Because in my opinion, the joke is the MVP is on the 49ers. He's called Christian McCaffrey. Like,
of course
he's the guy that fucking runs the ball in for Brock Purdy. Give me a break. Like, that guy's busted.
Yeah, exactly. Brock Purdy's job is to throw slants to Christian McCaffrey, and Christian McCaffrey runs 50 yards.
Exactly. And then people go, that's a touchdown. It's like, is it though? Is it really though?
Look, I think Brock has definitely exceeded expectations. He was the last pick in the draft. Sure. Like, he's been good, but he should realistically, in any normal last season, this should not even be a conversation. Like,
he shows, in my opinion, that's a player that shows you that the eye test supersedes stats. Because some of his stats at times in the season looked mega, but like the eye test tells you that that's not like I say, think of the list of players I was listening to. In 10 years, are we going to go and Brock's retired now? Like, look, we might not even know who this guy is in 5 years. Let's see.
Yeah, I also, if you went by stats this season, you'd think that Russell Wilson was good. Whereas if you actually watched the games with your eyes, it's fucking horrible. Like, if you watch a couple highlights of him throwing the fucking mega bombs and like Cortland Sutton having the catch of the century, right? It looks amazing, but you miss all of the times where he like can't see an open receiver, throws a check down for -2 yards. And it's like, oh, we'll just do that 3 times in a row and then punt the football. Like, it is awful to watch.
Listen, all I want to do is get a time machine, put this Russell Wilson in, and send him back to that Super Bowl against the Broncos.
Fuck,
that's all.
I hate it so much.
I know.
Thorin, why did Russell Wilson have to sabotage the Broncos twice on both sides?
I know, exactly. That's the worst part of it, isn't it? I know.
I was so excited when Russell Wilson when the trade was made, and now it's just like, man, I got fucking razor caked, man. This is
I know, but you did so badly. Because I also thought it was going to work out really well, but
of course,
I realized now I was on one.
The Seahawks knew the entire time, man. They fleeced the Broncos. Like,
yes,
Pete Carroll won 1,000%. All right, last question. Favorite desserts?
Ooh.
Because
even though I like sweet things, I'm not that much of a dessert guy. Like, I like a big main course and then just leave it at that. So I'm not sure for this one. What's up there for you?
I like salted caramel a lot. So I like even my desserts salty. So like salted caramel things, salted caramel ice cream, I love. I like pie. Cake is shit. Pie is where it's at. Like good apple pie, fucking great.
Here's the problem, though, Monty. This is one thing I've always wanted to bring up with both you Americans, because you're always going on about apple pie. And then you might not know this, but actually places in Europe like the Netherlands and Germany also brag about their apple pie, right? The way they make it. Here's what I'll never understand, Monty. You know this is someone who knows Anglo food. Apple pie's brilliant. There better be some custard coming. Like, it's not just the apple pie, right? Well, dude, just the apple pie on a plate. Like, the custard is what makes it delicious, or some cream or something.
Vanilla
That's
ice
the way
cream,
we do
right?
it in England.
A la mode.
Oh,
you have to have like vanilla ice cream with it. Yes. I totally agree.
Because just paired so well, in my opinion. Yeah, on its own, it's too dry, isn't it? Like, what are you doing? Like, you pair it with something dairy, and it'll be delicious. I'm telling you. So there's a good one.
I like
by the way, it doesn't have to be a pie. It can be a bramble, like a blackcurrant
blackberry brambles are fire. Yeah,
it's gonna be delicious as fuck. Yeah,
blackberry brambles with fresh cream poured on it is fucking great. I actually used to pick blackberries in California and make the brambles with picked blackberries with my mom.
I used to know someone who had like all the bushes. I used to do the same thing when I was a kid. It's mega, and it's delicious as well. And the best thing about that food, by the way, if you've never had it, is you add the sugar, so you can make it as sweet or as sour as you want it to be. So you can just get it right to your tastes. I actually think, by the way, in general, I'm with you, Monty. Things like actual pies, they're so underrated. Like, I'll tell you another one a lot of people haven't had. It's a classic British one. Is you have like rhubarb crumble.
I know rhubarb
sounds
pie.
weird. It's delicious, isn't it? Isn't that really delicious? Yeah.
Rhubarb pie is the greatest because I like the sour element to it a lot. Yeah. I was going to mention rhubarb pie. I also love pumpkin pie. I love pumpkin pie. That's a very American thing to have for Thanksgiving. But pumpkin pie is wonderful. I've made, like, there are some cakes that I like. I just don't like very sweet or very dense cakes. So I like Earl Grey tea cakes, that I've made with like kind of bitter chocolate. Do you also
find this, mate? The classic one is a chocolate cake. Dude, I find that too rich. Even though I like sweet things. I really can't eat like more. I can't even eat the whole slice sometimes. It's too much for me.
Yeah, it's not good. I also like ice cream. I think ice cream's great. How can you not like ice cream? Ice cream's just the best. So I think those are mostly my favorite desserts. I could fuck with a not too sweet chocolate mousse, like a more airy chocolate mousse. Like the hyper sweet, hyper dense chocolate mousses are too much. Creme brulee is great.
My favorite dessert is double lift. You're gonna go, what do you mean? I've been eating that little cupcake for years. I'll tell you what, it always hit the spot. By the way, are you ready? That's just reminded me, Monty. I have to give you your update. And here we are with breaking news from the Double Lift Central. Right. So the other day, Double Lift did a little clip. You can watch it on YouTube, where he attempted. Now, why Double Lift would attempt it, I don't know. But impromptu, not even with like a guide, he attempted to, off the top of his head, list his 5 greatest ADCs ever. Because obviously, those Chinese polls were just done recently. Now, his problem is, because he's Double Lift, and on the screen, he sees the 5 names from the Chinese poll, he just puts them in a different order because it's Double Lift and his brain can only see the names on the screen. So are you ready? This is 2 statements he makes within that will blow your mind, Monty, as someone who does this show. On the one hand, he talks about Bang and says he was really good for a long time. And I want to pause and go, Double Lift, that's factually wrong. Like, wasn't he really good for like 2 years, mate?
What, like 2015, 2016?
That one thought in your mind, Monty, that Bang's got to be up there because Bang was really good for a long time. And are you ready? After doing his 5, he remembers he forgot to even include Deft. I want those two facts to simultaneously exist in your mind. That deft. But Ban, we better respect Ban, guys. He was really good for. This is why I love and hate Doublelift. I realize now it's two sides to the same coin, and without that sourness, I can't have the sweet, delicious stupidity of what he did. So I'm just living with it now. I understand Doublelift. It's all good, mate. It's all good. Just keep doing it. Keep making the content. I'll keep watching. Okay. It's basically like that. You know that famous Trump tweet. One of my favorite of all time, by the way. It's that Trump tweet where it's from like 2012 or something, mate. It's where he goes like, Coca-Cola said they don't like me. I don't care. I'll keep drinking that trash. And it's just like, what even is? That's what I think about Doublelift's content, basically. And I will keep drinking that trash, don't worry.
I just think it's funny because like Deft is a conversation for top 180 carry.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. Number one, probably.
Especially after he won Worlds. Like there's a legitimate.
Dude, I think people genuinely don't know this piece of trivia about Deft. Deft has got LPL, LCK, MSI, and Worlds. He's the only player with all of them. This guy is unreal, mate. Although I guess now Ruler would have it as well.
Yes, Ruler does have it. Yeah.
Yes, Ruler has it as well because he has the LPL. So I guess it's two players have that. That's a pretty sick piece of trivia, mate. That's a bagger right there.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, he completed LPL and MSI in the same year, so I guess he did finally finish it
if
off.
he says some more funny shit, I will do that like a segment, like, oh wait, we're breaking it again, double it on the wires again. Like, if he does some more, a bit like Ryu back in the day, I'll update you guys when he says some more shit. Don't worry.
We need some graphics for that, just like a scrolling double lift news alert.
Me with the little like fucking Telegram thing, like, yeah, exactly.
All right, that was our last question. We got to them all again this week. It's been a long show. It's been 4 hours long. I like how we did a 4-hour show when there haven't been any League of Legends games, just because we have to explain Saudi Arabia to people for an hour, I guess. Well, we'll have lots of League of Legends to talk about next week, guys. After LEC starts, we get to see all the pro players playing their official matches on a patch that they do not understand, and we do not either. Join us in our quest for discovery on the next episode of Summoning Insight. See you then.